Hello. Well, I don't know how many people are tuning in right now. I don't really, this is my first rodeo as far as the live streaming is concerned. So, thank you. That's me. That's- um, so thanks to anyone who may be listening. Very much appreciate. And I mean, this is more or less like the I mean, the reason why I decided to start doing this is because I feel like the beautiful toilet, it has a very narrow focus. A kind of it's been kind of restrictive because I wanted to stay focused on particular themes and subjects, mostly pertaining to literature, poetry, some more religious and philosophical. But I wanted to like broaden my scope a little bit, and I thought maybe live streaming would be an appropriate way to undertake a more broad interview project. There's a lot of people that I would like to talk to, but that just don't really fit the mold of the beautiful toilet, and hence here we are. I mean, this is all very off the cuff. It's meant to be looser and unstructured. So, having said that, this episode I decided to talk. It took me a while to try to come up with a concept that I felt would be appropriate for starting this new project for launching um, this podcast, which I haven't even settled on a name for it yet, but I've really wanted to do this for a while, and I figured my friend Charlie Looker, a very talented musician, but also just someone that I can talk to for hours about virtually anything. And I thought, maybe a subject that's kind of been on my mind that I feel like we're both kind of invested in is like the question of nihilism, both in its more straightforward analytical, like philosophy aspects, and also as pertains to like certain, social, cultural, and political trends, which we're all privy to. So with that said, that's more or less my introduction. So I'll won't waste any more time, and I'll bring them on. So,
What's up,
hello,
Nick?
how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I just finished teaching in the city,
Nice.
grabbed a burger across the street, and I just made myself an old fashioned here. So
Oh, nice. I'm drinking Cuddy Sark.
excellent.
So, but yeah, I guess well, also I guess I should give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, since I don't know how much of the audience is familiar with your work, and you know what uh what you would say about your own you know
Well,
career as a musician and as an intellectual.
career as an intellectual. Yeah, no.
I mean, that's how I know you. So
But thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's at a certain point you got to just own whatever it is.
I think
I
we had this conversation this last time. The last time I had you on, what did I called you like a critic, like meaning like a cultural
cultural
critic, and,
critic, right?
and
Right.
you were just like, damn, what?
Well, that's yeah, but it's like with my music is what I was put on earth to do. So someone
Mhm.
has, someone wants to talk with me about my music, I'd have a very serious, whatever. But if
Oh yeah.
someone had like
No,
a
but then I'd be so out of my so out of my lane, as you say. Like I'm like musically illiterate, so
right, no, totally. No, I just mean it's like I don't stand by. I mean anything other than my actual musical work. I mean anything else, I don't really stand by it
uh-huh.
that much. I mean, you know what I mean? If someone was just like, yeah, you were wrong about X, Y, and Z take, I'd be like, yeah, probably. I don't know, dude. It's like, I
Uh-huh.
mean, whereas if you doubted the, seriousness of my musical work, I mean,
Mhm.
you would just be incorrect, But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I'm a composer, singer, guitar player, producer, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of different projects over the years, man, including playing at your bonfire on Brighton Beach, which is
Oh
that
yeah,
was
great.
very
Not probably
wholesome.
not your flashiest gig, but I hope you enjoyed it
That
nonetheless.
was
Hopefully,
wholesome fun, man.
so yeah.
Wholesome.
Also, this isn't really the subject, but what you say does bring to mind something that I've always been interested in, as far as people and their interests are concerned, which is the distinction between breadth and depth of knowledge. You know,
Hmm.
do you identify with those terms in any way, or?
Well, yeah, with music, it's depth in several areas, so a lot
Mhm.
of depth and some breadth. Uh,
Mhm.
Probably a lot of both. I mean, with yeah, I don't know though. With yeah, with anything intellectual, reading, uh, I guess, breadth, you know?
Mhm.
But even that, I mean, you know, any philosophy stuff I talk about, you know, I just latch on to these certain little things, you know? I
Mhm.
haven't read the whole book very often. But yeah,
Oh
breadth.
yeah, I mean, I feel like a complete like Philistine as far as like hard philosophy is concerned. Like, I mean, I'm very much an autodidact, and with all the doing what's the word? All all that that entails. I think there are certain intellectual mistakes that come with being an autodidact.
Mhm.
Sometimes you feel like you've had like this great idea that um, that it's just going to change everything, and then it turns out that it's like Munchausen's trilemma, or it's like something that someone's talked about like 100 years ago. So,
Right.
um,
I mean, thing is,
but
I don't know. No, go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, 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 you first.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to say, you know, I don't even know what philosophy, you know, when people use that word, it's like, I mean, I'm starting to realize that, you know, so much of the stuff that I got into over the years was this kind of French, continental, et cetera, kind of philosophy. It's like, I don't even know if that's real philosophy at this point. I mean, when I think about it, it's like half this shit is just like poetry. I mean, it's like, I mean, is is Deleuze philosophy? Yeah, some of it, I guess. But I mean, some of the stuff is really very painterly,
Mhm.
you know, mentally, you know,
Oh
as a,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. I
mean,
want
it's
to touch on that
so,
too later, but
but you know, like analytic philosophy, I have never read like, you know, like actually doing like logical proofs of like
oh right, right,
my thinking is not, it's too disordered for that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I'm
right,
literally too like not sane enough to do like Wittgenstein or something, you know. So
right.
but yeah, man. I the thing is though, I don't know, I'm all like self-deprecating and imposter syndrome with the intellectual side,
Uh-huh.
but then you fuck around on Twitter enough and you start really reading the heavy cats. And
Mhm.
after a while, you're like, this guy's not as smart as I thought, actually. This guy,
Yeah, yeah. No, 100.
yeah,
Percent.
yeah.
I think. Hmm. I think that when I say analytic kind of loosely, but I just mean, I mean, I feel the same. I'm fond of some continental philosophy. I think that often like the poetic vocabulary that it equips us with is, very useful, but it also has like a high threshold for allowing bullshit and like language games and obscurantism about important points. And I just kind of I do admire the strictures and like the clarity of definitions that you get from the analytic tradition. I think like defining terms and being very, not being cute about what you really mean and like trying to be precise are very virtuous intellectual qualities. But of course, I think that really like the big challenge with the analytic tradition as I've engaged with it is just a complete like lack of reflexivity about like its own assumptions. Like, especially about certain fine points in epistemology that I get really autistic over. That that I would I'm just like pulling out my hair, like why can you take this or that for granted?
Mhm.
And that's I also don't really have a base of knowledge to comment as broadly as I am about this. We're both out of our lane more or less in equal measure. Although I don't have I don't know what mine is exactly because I don't have any like particular technical specialities such as
Well,
music. Um,
I just seize onto these little things that like I obsessively think about, and they go into lyrics and they go into just punishing conversations where I'm a little drunk and I annoy people, you know. But
yeah.
just these nuggets that just mean everything to me, but it's not the entire book, you know. Just these little things in like Kristeva, you know, Foucault, these French guys, then you know, fashy dudes like Evola, these little things, you know what I mean? It's like, am I
Mhm.
gonna read that whole book and all, you know what I mean? But little things, I'm like
Oh,
that.
I read Ride the Tiger, and it was miserable.
You know, he's a
I
blowhard. I
don't
should
know if I got anything from it. I mean, people tell me that Revolt Against the Modern World is better, but man, like Ride the Tiger was a doozy.
I mean, yeah,
But
I'm
I think what you're
pandering to your rightist audience. I mean, actually, fascism viewed from the right is kind of a good one. Anyway, but but you know, I don't know, Baudrillard, these little things he sees onto like a term, a sentence, something that really, really makes sense to me. But then, you know, it's just like get the whole thing into a system, you know, like an entire way of viewing the world. I don't know, man, an ideology. It's like, nah, man, no. But
Mhm.
I was interested though in why nihilism, you know, I'm psyched when you invite me to do any of this stuff, so I'm into it. But I was kind of like, oh, you want to talk to me about nihilism? Because I don't. Maybe I'm forgetting some conversations, but you said that we're both kind of invested in this question
Right.
of nihilism. When did we talk about? I don't really.
I feel like we have, although I can't pinpoint a specific point. Before we get into it, also, just one thing to what you were saying about, well, I get the sense that like from your music, like you borrow a lot from like the kind of conceptual imagination of critical theory and of like of the humanities more broadly. And even though you're very humble about your own ability to opine about it, you nonetheless that you do kind of opine about it through your music. That's like the medium through which you feel best equipped to communicate. And I think that also kind of ties into what I always say about like breadth over depth, like because it's easy for like depth people. Finkelstein is very much one of these. He will never comment on any book unless he's like read it 10 times over cover to cover and like poured through the bibliography and looked at all the annotations. And he really tries to back away from or downplay his commenting on anything outside of like something where he feels like very specialized to talk about. His take would be more or less that you're unserious if you're not like an expert on the very specific thing that you're talking about. But I think the counter to that is that people that emphasize breadth, and I very much consider myself someone like that. They'll say like a little about a lot of things, but that's the utility of that is being able to like make connections across disciplines that would be more or less invisible.
Mhm.
There's something very myopic about like the way that any given discipline trains you to look at the world. I mean,
Yep.
I kind of think that like hard philosophy is the correct, the terminally correct one,
Okay.
because everything is kind of downstream from epistemology in my estimation. But
Yeah, I mean that's yeah. See, that's
like,
I don't know if I'm into like trying to know, you know, it's more like trying
hmm,
to think, you know,
hmm,
which maybe is not always going toward truth, you know.
hmm.
That's
Well,
sort of
I want to touch on that, but yeah, just to finish the concept, I feel like if you put an economist, you ask an economist any given question, like basically their entire academic training is, priming them to answer that question in the form of like, what should we do? We should do the thing that maximizes GDP. And they'll kind of like scoff at or poo-poo an answer that, enters other variables. There's kind of like an unwillingness to engage with like the meta analysis of what they're doing because like they're so myopic in the discipline and its like priorities and strictures as it exists. So and I think that that can happen in pretty much any discipline. And so, having a musician's take on philosophy and being, it's a corrective to perhaps the tendency of the philosopher to become too absorbed in their own models.
yeah, yeah, this expertise thing. I mean, the thing is, you know, that you're talking about knowing a lot about a little versus knowing a little about a lot. I mean, the thing is, I'll get on little pockets of a thing and I know a lot about that point or that
Mhm.
term. You know what I mean? But I don't know a lot about, you know what I'm saying? Like you can have a broad thing where you know a little about a lot, but that little that you know about each thing can be very profound, you know? Um,
Mhm.
so yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I just think it's a matter of trying to take different models for viewing reality and have them engage with and then challenge each other.
Yeah.
Um, so with that
Have
said, I
you,
suppose.
by the way,
I'm sorry.
did you ever read my essay on melisma? You probably haven't read that, right?
I saw your video on it.
Oh, you did. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that
that,
no, I mean that was one of the inspirations for the reading that I did that you went to last weekend.
oh, right.
Um,
It was inspired by that, man. Yeah. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, because you talk about in that video how when you sing, you're teaching a class, for example, and you start singing, and that gets everyone's attention more so perhaps than if you shout at them.
Yeah, heightened speech. Yeah, yeah. It's like a rhetorical and or oratory device, you know.
And
But
so that was what motivated me or inspired me to start that performance with at least like the spoken part of it, like notwithstanding like the intro, to start that with singing and with some kind of fake naive version of plain song.
yeah, it was very cool. It was very
Oh,
cool.
cool, thank you.
I mean,
Yeah.
I particularly liked the like. I mean, I think it might have been a SpongeBob reference that I didn't totally get, but like where you were like doing like meow meow, like the
Oh, like
right.
the gibberish parts.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Is
yeah, that was Doodle Bob. That was
yeah, right, right.
yeah, that he, SpongeBob draws in the sand. I don't know how familiar you are with the cartoon, but
Yeah, not as much as you might think because I
oh
think
no,
I
I
was
wouldn't necessarily expect you to be because you're like a good umpteen years older than me. So
yeah, so I was like maybe high school when SpongeBob came out, maybe
uh-huh.
like early high like 90 like when did that come out? Like 90s or like
Late '90s, yeah.
yeah, late 90s, right. So I was already like whatever, yeah, almost in college probably. So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm surprised that you're familiar with it at all as anything but like like any more than I'm familiar with Hello Kitty.
Yeah, I know it from following like black kid skater like meme pages and shit. It's like all like it's like all SpongeBob now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but the premise of the episode is that all the SpongeBob like gets a magic pencil from an artist who's stranded at sea, and he uses the pencil to draw a crude cartoon of himself, which springs to life and terrorizes him and Squidward. Um,
Oh, that's
yeah,
sick. Like
and all of that like gibberish that from that piece was transcribed directly from the episode. It's the way that Doodle Bob talks, and
nice, nice. Yeah.
I wanted to use it as like a kind of metaphor for miscommunication. I mean, I don't want to like go too much about
Yeah, I
this.
didn't need to derail
Most
to your
people
own stuff.
probably haven't heard it, and I do publish SpongeBob poems eventually, probably in a very different form, um, but that's but yeah, that was that was more or less inspired by your account of how singing is really attention getting, and trying to use it as this tool because the performance, like music, is kind of like the like most fully realized version of a live performance, qua live
It
performance.
is. Yeah, yeah. Or I guess you could say opera maybe is probably the ultimate because it's music and it's Gesamtkunstwerk and whatnot.
Right, right. Yeah, but like it's it's inherently ephemeral. You can do recorded music, but then you're just kind of creating a very precise script that can, facilitate reviving this ephemeral performance in different iterations over and over again. So it's kind of in the middle, but like music itself, it is time dependent, right? It's and so I think that having a musical aspect to some kind of reading is really meant to return it to its roots.
Oh yeah.
Um, and Ezra Pound, would say that poetry loses its way when it strays too far from music. And I don't. I mean, I'm very much like an autistic formalist, where it's like there's words on the page, and there should be like a formal poetics for that, and then there should be a formal poetics for, words spoken that are completely different from each other.
Word. Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I guess to like get into the main point. Yeah, I feel like we have talked about this before. There's an insinuation that's made on, I hate to refer to him, but on Crumbstack and a lot of like the journalism that's been done about so-called Times Square, about the New York scene as you know it, where and about Red Scare, where the observation that these things have taken a right wing turn is kind of equivocated with a turn towards nihilism, um, which to me seems very counterintuitive. It's in theory, like to be rightist should mean to be like pronomian, to be like in favor of like order and stricture, and it should be like the antithesis of nihilism. Like the ones who should have to answer for those charges, in theory, ought to be the ones who would like deconstruct systems of meaning, right? And yet, I think that it has resonance, and it's kind of gone more or less unquestioned because of maybe because of the superficiality with which some of these individuals who have been thus characterized engage with the ostensible right-wing values that they promote. And maybe there's it is merely meant to be like as you've characterized, a cult of transgression for its own sake.
Right. I mean, just first off, I will be able to riff with you on this, but I don't actually totally know that much about so-called dime square. I mean, because the thing is,
and I don't want to like add too much like crap to like the pile of that already exists about that dead scene anyway.
Well, yeah, but you're really talking about some ideas, the surrounding stuff, not we're not trying to like talk about people and stuff. But I mean, I don't I know who that guy Crumps is. I know his general attitude towards certain things, but I just know Twitter. I know Twitter. I don't subscribe to people's Substacks, so that's kind of that's the extent of my. And I actually don't listen.
And that's good, because I'm always like, I want to like touch grass. I want to like get out of the weeds in terms of a lot of these, really like parochial discourses. And like I don't want to, I endeavor, one of my projects and like one of my ambitions for this year is to try to be as not online as possible, to try to purge like Twitter vocabulary from my lexicon as much as possible, and like speak in terms that like an 80-year-old can understand as like a force of habit, because it's so self-absorbed and it's so
well, it's like code switching, right? I mean,
yeah.
Like,
yeah, but like, how many times have you known someone that's like very online and they just like are completely unable to code switch, and they're just like, oh, grandpa, what do you think of based,
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. My friends find the shit charming because they're all like, none of my friends my age are even into any of this shit. You know what I mean? But but no, that's not true. That's not true. But in general, yeah, the full on Twitter speak. But okay, yeah, like nihilism, man. I mean, well, you just brought up like that people, that guy Crumps was talking about the nihilism surrounding people adopting right wing, or hipsters, for lack of a better words, what we called our day, what we called us in our day. Art world, intellectual hip people getting into right wing shit as being
the dark elves, as they say.
What was that?
The dark elves.
It's dark elves. Just what does that just mean? Like,
oh no, that was a Yarvin analogy.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. What was I gonna say? Well, yeah, like I don't know anyone who identifies themselves as a nihilist. Like, I don't think of that as like a self descriptor. It's like a thing that's leveled against people, right? It's like someone says, like I only think of, I've never met anyone who's like, I'm a nihilist. I guess like, unless you're like, 12 or 13, like it's always something where you're like, oh, you're just being nihilistic, or you don't really believe that. You're just not like, right. I mean,
there are like, philosophical nihilists in different forms. I think that one of the most interesting is probably like moral nihilism. Like, when people say that, I think they mean some combination of like moral and existential nihilism. And I think that they're kind of right to equivocate those two, to recognize that there is a very, tenuous distinction between saying there's no meaning broadly and that there's no moral facts, because like meaning kind of implies like a normative response to any given thing. But I mean, there are like philosophers that would be like self-identify as like moral nihilists. In fact, I think that more should,
Who would be a moral nihilist, like, or who might even
I feel like the best examples would probably be like someone from like the analytic tradition. Maybe, who wrote that book? I think it's called The Atheist's Handbook.
Sounds ghastly.
No, it's actually but also, okay, I can't find that individual author, but I mean, there are like moral philosophers that will just outright say, there are no moral facts,
Okay, so
which is,
nihilism refers to moral.
jarring to hear. But I actually, what's that?
So nihilism means like having no moral.
Like moral nihilism in particular, which I feel like is the appropriate place to start with, at least
Okay.
because it's the simplest and most self-contained. Um, I mean, I actually do think that Nietzsche, like, I have not read anything in Nietzsche that would suggest to me that he is anything but like a hard moral nihilist.
No, man. Well, I mean, well, he he is specific that he says, I can't remember if it's Genealogy of Morals or something, but he says he is both anti-Christ and anti-nihilist.
Right,
And
right. And I think that when he says that, he's kind of referring to like existential nihilism and as like a kind of, he is making prescriptions, which I would view as like a contradiction because I do think that his um, general outlook would preclude making any like saying that there are moral facts about the world. And I'm like kind of a hardliner about if you can't acknowledge there are moral facts that a moral statement is objectively true or false, then it collapses to nihilism rather quickly. And I think that, like a hard, like moral realist stance is necessary. And, but yeah, I mean, I haven't read anything in Nietzsche that would actually suggest to me that he thinks it's objectively wrong to massacre innocent toddlers with a chainsaw,
yeah, right. It does, right. Yeah, there isn't anything particularly in there. I mean, I guess his thing was just, he says Christianity is the most nihilistic thing because it like defers all value and meaning to an afterlife that's not
Mhm.
now, right? I
Hmm.
mean, that's sort of
Yeah.
his point. I
Well,
mean,
I think it's what he characterizes as nihilism is a disavowal of the contingent and the problematic and, things that anything but like a complete, like, and probably arbitrary decision to affirm life in its totality, and all of experience and, um, I don't want to say creation because that kind of implies the existence of creator, but all which is, in its in its perfectly contingent form.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, he's into
well,
affirmation. I mean, he believes in life, whatever that is, but
mhm.
affirming life means that there's something. I mean, so he's a moral nihilist, but not an existential nihilist. So what's an
That's
existential?
my, preference. That's how I like to characterize him. I mean, I feel like as soon as you, bring Nietzsche into it and um, engage with like the nihilism question, like you can get disputed from so many different points.
But you're saying moral nihilism versus existential, which I just hadn't even really thought of. So I mean, like,
I think that I mean, how I would characterize existential nihilism as more broadly saying, there's no meaning to existence.
it's just
The earth,
depression. I mean,
life, and
it's just being
depression. I
being
mean,
bummed
no,
out.
I don't know because like I like depression is a psychological condition, and this is like an argument that a thesis that's put forward about the world, but which is that there is no meaning. I mean, that the kind of Promethean ideal that you can be the author of meaning in a godless world, I think, is Nietzsche's way of approaching that question, which I think is ultimately futile. I admire like the pluck and uh, ambition of it, but I think that it's intellectually untenable.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, intellectually. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what we're talking about with meaning. I mean, I affirm. As a musician, I mean, it's hard to say I'm dealing with meaning. It's very easy to say I'm dealing with affirmation. You
Hmm.
know, I
Hmm.
think plugging in a guitar and just playing, making sound in a ritual atmosphere. I mean, you know, I don't know if I'm like uh, pointing to meaning. Existence has meaning. I like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't, I feel like I have a better sense of what affirmation means rather than,
Well, as a musician, do you think that you should do what you do? Like in the sense like it is
or like normatively.
normative, like moral good for you to
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you would probably, if I had to guess, probably like be on the side that would say that like moral facts exist, that these things are, indeed like, realities that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, trying to figure out right and wrong is a moral, uh, yeah, we have a moral obligation to try to figure out what's morally right. That's my no,
Of course.
that's my, but it's, it's constant questioning and
Well, yeah. Have you ever heard of the terms like epistemic humility and epistemic modesty with regards to meta ethics?
no, are those two different things, modesty versus humility?
Or
Or
I'm sorry, epistemic modesty versus epistemic confidence.
okay, modesty versus epistemic confidence. No, I haven't. What's
It's
the modesty?
basically this is like a meta tool that kind of can apply to different like moral systems, and the idea being like, okay, say you've concluded that the Kantian like moral system is the correct one, the normative one, and you ought to follow that. You can either be epistemically confident about it and align your decision making process with Kantianism 100% as much as you're able, or you can epistemic modesty would be to say, okay, well, Kantianism has X probability of being right. Let's make other allowances for other moral systems. For example, like, maybe give like 10% of your decision-making process to utilitarianism, or 10% to like a Christian moral system or whatever, as much as you assign these systems like probability of being correct, and try to aggregate these things and like, hedge your bets and account for all possible moral systems, which, I mean, I don't really have a position on what I prefer. I think it's a really interesting meta-ethical question, but that's not really something that I've thought
Yeah.
about.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I actually don't know all the different isms and moral frameworks that you named. I mean, the little bit that I've read Kant with like the critique of pure reason is that, and that, I mean, that seems very epistemic. That seems inherently epistemically pretty humble, as far as, I mean, if you're dealing with not really being able to know objects in themselves and stuff like
Mhm.
that, and that you're sort of always probing at this unknown outside.
I don't understand Kant for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that I do know that there is a fundamental humility there, just in the sense of that you're trying to touch this outside, this noumena,
Right. I mean, but I think that the ethical conclusions are very absolutist.
What are his ethical conclude? Like, what is he?
Well,
What's
he has
what's his
three
takeaway?
categorical imperatives, two of which are really considered like significant, and the third of which is kind of passed over most of the time. One of which being like I forget which one is which, but one of which is that you should act in such a way that if you were to universalize that given action, that that it would not create an inherent like contradiction. Um,
If you,
so, the big conclusion that's drawn from this, and like the very radical conclusion that he comes to, is that it's absolutely and unconditionally wrong to lie. Because if you lie, you erode the foundations upon which communicating truth are
yeah,
based, and so it creates a logical contradiction. And to do so is non-normative because it's impossible if you universalize the action. Um,
yeah, I'm
and
kind of into that, that thing of like, it's wrong to lie, even if it's for a greater end in the end. I like that idea. I totally lie. So
Right, me too. But
I don't,
and
I mean,
it's like that when the big example or like the thought experiment that's used to kind of debunk that is the Jews in the attic. The Nazi soldier comes up to you and he's like, "Are
oh,
there Jews in the attic?" And it's like, I mean, under Kant's moral system, there are two ways that you can kind of get out of this. You can either say, yes, it is wrong to lie under those conditions, or you can play some what some might consider semantic games and say, well, it's not really lying because this person has abnegated their entitlement to the truth.
Yeah,
By the way, I think that the kind of like Catholic moral philosophy about this is more or less the same, that it is unconditionally and deontologically wrong to lie. And I think that that same kind of dilemma would exist within Catholicism, whether you, and even though I think that it sounds kind of like a cop out and it, very well may be characterized that way, I lean towards the side of the abnegation of entitlement to moral truth,
yeah, man.
but I don't want to do it just because it feels intuitive.
Yeah,
Also.
well, dude, forget about Jews in the attic. I mean, like, do I look fat? Is like already I'm ready to fucking lie. You know what I'm saying? It's just like,
Right.
it doesn't take a lot to get me to fucking lie. But
Yeah.
I do like the idea that it's like 99.99 percent wrong to lie. But in any case, even
well, I even feel like it has like the foundation for the system like relies on its universality, and like the only way out of that um is to deny that speaking a false statement in a given situation is truly lying, is truly like correctly characterized as lying. I think that's kind of the takeaway, not so much like, even if it's not even like a very extreme general statement so much as a an absolute um an absolute one. But sorry, I didn't mean to get
Oh,
carried away.
no. I mean, I was just saying, to bring it back to nihilism that you wanted to talk about. I mean, it's like, none of what we're talking about is nihilism. This is all just versions of giving a shit,
Mhm.
And I sort of like, yeah, to bring it back to this thing of like who is nihilistic in our midst, you know what I mean? Like you were just talking about, like, okay, how did we get there? We were like, what philosophers would call themselves nihilists? Then we talked about Nietzsche. I
Mhm.
said maybe he's not as nihilistic. I don't know, like, I mean, yeah, just as far as people that I talk to, like, I don't know anyone who's like, I'm a nihilist. I mean, I like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm not sure. I mean, who do you think's nihilistic in your life or in culture or in
Hmm.
Times Square or in, like,
Hmm.
cross paths with people. I mean, you can call not. I mean, I think what, like, a lot of people call nihilistic now, they just mean like insincere or cynical, right? I mean, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Or
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
when people are like, oh, like, you just mess around with right wing shit to be an edge lord. You're just trying to trigger libs or whatever.
It's what
That's,
you characterized as like the cult of transgression.
yeah. I mean, I don't think that's nihilistic, but it's like, uh,
Hmm. So do you think like maybe there is like an underlying like moral premise to like this idolatry of transgression where the dynamism and like a kind of like deconstruction of authority is actually upheld as a moral precept in itself, or like a good thing that must be encouraged, like, or
yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, cult of transgression. I mean, um, yeah, it's
because like
hard.
that's kind of how I would characterize like the left wing tendency broadly, is just that there is an inherent good to deconstructing like systems of stricture and hierarchy and authority. Um,
Yeah, well, that's why. Yeah, well, that's why the people who get on these right wing vibes just to deflate libs and just to like not be a sucker and just to fuck with people and be edge lords. That's very leftist of them. I mean, you're saying right,
yeah, yeah.
but I mean, it's the same impulse, you know. I mean, people who are just in an unprincipled way trying to fash out to fuck with people. I mean, those same people are going to be communists like in 2 years when the trend comes around. Like,
Mhm.
that's not nihilism, but that's just fun. Maybe it's fun to
Mhm.
fuck with people if you have a certain
Yeah, yeah.
personality. Play,
Well, that was like very much like the spirit of 4chan in the old days too, and like that kind of like he will not divide us type of energy that was big in like 2016, 2017. And
yeah, yeah,
but there is like a very like sincere core to it in a lot of ways. There's like this jouissance and like just there's also a feeling of amity and affection for your fellow travelers who are
I
like
guess so. Yeah.
who are slaughtering these sacred cows, like
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay. I will say this. We'll say this. When there are things that I used to be mad at, disgusted by, and somewhat afraid of
Hmm.
that I thought of as right wing stuff,
Hmm.
but actually it was sort of more what I maybe would call nihilism. You know what
Hmm.
I mean?
Yeah,
Be-
yeah. I
Because
mean, like,
I was never mad or scared or disgusted by like Marcus Aurelius or something. Like, you know what I'm
right.
saying? Like I was
Yeah,
never
yeah.
at like Frederick the Great or some shit like that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
but this kind of but there was this kind of nihilism around that time, 2016, 2017, where it's like, I don't know if you'd call it nihilism, but this kind of like if you really just believe that everything is just fucking power, like that's it, not like on some like hierarchy is a good thing, like not that kind of principled shit, but on some
Hmm.
just like everything is just a mechanical play of forces,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
nothing is higher. There is the sense that to me that is kind of nihilistic, this like totally mechanistic view of the fucking
Uh-huh.
world.
Right. Well, I mean, that I feel like what you're describing is just like materialism broadly.
Yeah, yeah, man. That's dude. That's fucking nihilistic. Because you know what it is, man. Principled lefty types or libs. It's basically the human, right?
Hmm.
The human, whatever you mean by that, capital H. That's the
Hmm.
seat of like meaning, and it's essentially religious.
Hmm.
And in more right wing type things, it might be God, you know, if it's just really just religion, or other like higher values that aren't human but are non-nihilist, you know. There's something
Hmm.
tethering life to something higher than just mechanism, you know what I mean? It's like,
Hmm.
I mean, dude, you know what's nihilistic, dude? Nick Land is fucking nihilistic, man.
Hmm.
I fuck it. I mean, I so so I actually like I like his work. So I a lot of
And
it's
I remember when we talked on the beautiful toilet, I said I haven't read him. I don't understand him, but
well, see, I don't know if you call it like nihilistic, but just this. I don't know, man. I'm not fully equipped to like you know, but feeling like a machine, feeling like everything is just machines. I mean, this Deleuze does point to this shit. There's this like normative. He's like trying to like do this cope of like this normative, like humanistic sort of kind of trying to be a nice guy with normative values or something. But if you're really reducing everything to machines, man, like I don't know, man. Like, um, yeah, this is, but I'm just talking about what feels nihilistic to me. So then it just comes back to like, am I just talking about like shit that bums me out? Like I don't know.
well, I
Like
mean, I feel like what you're saying, you're casting a pretty wide net in terms of like if I understand you correctly, I feel like the consequence of what you're saying would be that to deny a supernatural reality would kind of inherently require nihilism as like logical like culmination of that worldview, which I think, which is one that I subscribe to, but I, you know, that's also that does kind of um, group in a lot of people who would not identify with that way
I
that
know,
way.
I know, I know. But see, I never understand how these people who are like these hyper rationalist, totally atheist,
Mhm.
like we're all just molecules, like
Mhm.
spurred out, like hyper rationalist people. Like, why are they not down with randomly killing people? Like they can never
No,
really.
this is the contradiction, and this is kind of I think this is one thing that I wanted to talk about. You know, because I get very adamant about you know, okay, like you have to like tell me what your moral presuppositions are if we're going to if you're going to like make prescriptions on me, you know?
Right, right, right.
And
Yeah,
like I think that basically like one thing that, you know, um that might surprise a lot of people is that I kind of admire like the moral nihilist position because I feel like it's very internally consistent. It's, you know, it is a stable way of viewing the world, and I kind of respect like the pursuit of truth for its own sake, even you know, even if the conclusion is officially like morally like ugly, you know, like a complete indifference to these things must be ugly by any morally realist standard, I think. um but
Yeah.
yet like that, being willing to be very rigorous about like reasons for believing in things, I think kind of is actually a moral good. And I think that like I don't really tolerate in my epistemology, in my caliphate, there will be no moral assumptions. I think that
No,
at
no
least
moral.
arbitrarily. Right, like I don't think it's necessary. I think that to just like have a moral axiom is really not necessary to create a stable worldview. Um, and so if morality do exist, it has to proceed from like epistemological and metaphysical claims. Because otherwise you've opened the door for arbitrariness. And I think that like allowing for arbitrariness is kind of nihilistic in itself, because if you just say, well, I just take it as for granted. And, I think this is something that the right wing does a lot. And well, it has different manifestations and, both ideological persuasions, but like having sex with animals is just wrong and I don't need to explain it, you know? And I'm
Right.
like, no, I think you do. I think you need to explain it. And I won't take, well, it just is as an answer. I think that it proceeds from very core beliefs about epistemology and about the nature of things that having sex with animals is wrong, but it's very far downstream. And if you open that door for arbitrariness, if your only point is, well, it's just wrong because it is because I said so, then you basically have you have no recurse, you have no
Yeah, yeah,
response to
yeah. I
someone
don't
who
know if
says,
it's
not,
even
having sex with animals is morally compulsory. Like
that it's
but you could just like invert any statement, massacring innocent toddlers with a chainsaw is actually a good thing. And like, what would your response be if your entire like basis is just like, I am willing to accept the arbitrariness and like launch a moral assumption? I think these things have to be grounded in metaphysical and epistemological um, ideas. Sorry, I've been on my high horse a little bit, but
no, 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 it's okay. Right. Well, but when you say they have to, I mean, but you don't like you want them to be, but I mean, you can't explain to me personally why it's wrong to massacre toddlers, right? Or could you? I mean,
I think, yeah, I mean, I would try. I'm not the most, I mean, I think that this is where I might allow for like some measure of epistemic humility. And I think this is, I think, where I would also allow for, religious belief as like part of, deferring to a greater epistemological apparatus rather than like my own deduction. But like terminally, I think that it has to be rooted in your own deduction. And I think by a very like strict deductive process, you can get from, uh, very core assumptions about like I think therefore I am, or like something is there therefore God created it, one of those two. You can work up from there to it is absolutely a moral fact that it's wrong to massacre innocent toddlers with a chainsaw, period. Like I do believe in that. I think it's procedurally correct, and I think that that moral reasoning should be conducted by such a method.
yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever like deduced why anything is right and wrong. I mean, I don't think I've ever done that. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess I have some belief that cruelty. I want to say I think cruelty is inherently wrong, and I'd like to say it's inherently wrong because it's ugly, and that beauty is truth and truth is beauty, and I find
Mm,
cruelty ugly. You know what I mean?
mm.
I think it's ugly, therefore it's bad. Thing is, I get going with it, and I'm like, I don't even think cruelty is always ugly. I think a little bit of it can be fucking beautiful. So that's what's fuck. Then
Yeah,
it's a
I don't
question.
really share like an inherent like moral like I don't really think I have an inherent like moral disavowal of cruelty. Like, I would take a pretty radical like um position about that it's like neither inherently morally good nor bad in its pure form. I mean, I think that
It's like case by case,
the
or like
I mean, actually, like Nietzsche and I kind of like would share a moral system in that, and I think that he kind of like I would actually be interested. I haven't seen this, or I don't know if it exists, to the best of my knowledge, but to see like Nietzsche engage the with the what's the word, with like a hard like like analysis of like Augustinian or Thomistic value theory, because I think that the Christian tradition broadly it has reached a kind of Platonic consensus where that which is the good is that which is that which exists in a sense, and like to exist, part of existing is to like be in full accordance with your teleology. So things can exist in various forms of privation, but like evil has no essence unto itself. It's purely like a lack of something that's good.
Privatio boni or whatever, right?
What's that?
Like privatio boni or whatever that
Oh,
is.
I don't know the term.
It's like the lack of good. It's not a It's
yeah. And so because of that, like evil really is not like it's a reality we have to contend with, but it has no being in itself. And so
I'm very attracted to the idea of the substantiality of evil, and that's not something I could like justify to you, but I find the idea that it's not just a lack of good, but that evil is a fucking thing, like bomb
really,
and shit.
I'm surprised when you say that. I feel like I like when I look at like Gnostic traditions or like Manichaeism or even Zoroastrianism, people will ask me like, oh, because you're into your Persian heritage and stuff, do you think like Zoroastrianism is cool because it was like a monotheistic religion before Christianity? And I'm like, no, not really, because the monotheism distinction is really kind of silly if you break it down. And then also like, because Zoroastrianism, I feel like, not to be too uncharitable, but I honestly feel like that characterization of value theory, that there's some kind of like symmetry between good and evil, that where like, good or evil can have qualia unto itself, like seems, like it seems immature to me. Sorry, I don't mean to be uncharitable, but
no, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, you're
like,
some less into black metal than some of us, but yeah, it's
but no, I feel like it's the thrill of like the thrill of destruction that you get from like nihilistic black metal or something, or like from evil.
Nah, but black metal's not nihilistic though, man. It's either Nietzschean or just Hitlerish, I guess.
Well, so, but you think it's okay? So evil. Well, you said before, like you can't really like say you're into evil. You're like upholding it as good if you if you.
I know, man. I'm not like arguing that there is that evil is a substance, rather than a lack of good. But I'm attracted to that idea. Like I like that idea.
What do you feel like is that's particular appeal? Because it seems like a lot of people are drawn to Gnosticism today, and I think that there's a very long-standing cliche that like progressivism is just like rehashed Gnosticism, which is very trite at this point. But like, I think that the analogy kind of has, I think it holds water. I think it's I think that the analogy is not completely arbitrary, and it has there are persuasive points to be made that like a lot of progressivism does seem like Gnosticism, and in that sense is not nihilistic at all. But sorry,
I'm actually not familiar with that argument. I know there was some I know James Lindsay says that a lot, but I don't know. I haven't read what that is or whatever. I know what the premise of Gnosticism is for sure. I'm looking at a bunch of Gnostic books over here. The Gnostic Bible and the Gnostic Gospels. But I don't know about this thing of progressivism being. Wait. So the Gnostic vibe is that evil has substance, or that it's just a lack of good?
Oh, that it has substance.
That it has right. Okay, right. Like the demiurge is evil.
Right. And it's like these two things have some kind of symmetrical relationship where they both contain substances and lobby for their own.
Right. Rather than a lack of good, and the lack of good. This other thing, the Thomistic, is that what you're talking? It's Thomistic and Augustinian. The other way.
I mean, I think to like get to the root of it. I mean, I would probably consider it Platonic more than anything.
Right.
At its core. I think that's kind of. I have not known of an earlier philosophical tradition that that relied on privation theory.
So the privation thing is that evil is just simply a lack of good, and lack of good means not fulfilling your telos. Is that?
Yeah, well, yeah, and it kind of collapses to like a lack of good is like not being. And I think I can come up with like a couple of meta ethical arguments for why being is better than non-being. The first of which is an appeal to like epistemic consistency, that in order to reason about and draw moral
You have
conclusions,
to
it must
exist.
exist rather than
Right.
not.
Right. 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 No. 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 Yeah. 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 No. No. Well. Well. Okay. 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 Right. Well. So in that case, right, I am doing good. Making me being a musician and doing what I do is good because I was born to do it, and I am fulfilling what I'm supposed to do. So, but by that, I mean, does that mean no one's telos is to be a child molester or anything? I mean, because I mean, if you're just crushing it at being a chimo and like, you were just born. I mean, some of these people were just born to do
Well,
it,
I
man.
think that's a problem with like teleology. It's like without any governing, I think that the problem with like natural law theory is that it only makes sense and it only becomes like properly like morally normative if you believe in like a supernatural authority, which by pure power of will says it is better to do this or that. That like consistency with the natural law is actually morally necessary.
Yeah. 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 Um,
Hold on, let me get my laptop charger because I'm running low on battery. It's like right over there. I'm just
okay. Okay.
I'm a professional, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we're still not really the nihilism thing, man. We're still not, I'm sort of, I'm learning about all this stuff other than nihilism here, which is good, but
But I guess to kind of to state my position, like I feel like because I have like very demanding standards in terms of in terms of the principle of sufficient reason and like kind of having reasons for what you believe, I'm actually pretty respectful of the position that there's simply no positive reason to believe in an objective moral order, that there is a lack of structure governing reality, and that like moral like prescriptive statements are inherently false because they invoke a system that just doesn't exist. I think that you can create an internally consistent worldview, and I think that the problem with that is like to be an advocate for that, I feel like you kind of have to admit that everything in our very nature will try to lead us away from this truth. And I think this is kind of the problem with Nietzsche is like, he might deny like moral facts or like an objective like moral order to the world. And yet he keeps, he's trying to do ethics without believing in the foundation for prescriptive ethics in the first place. And it kind of puts him in this situation where it's just like, oh, well, you should transcend, you should become powerful, you should become meaningful, and construct systems of meaning and be glorious, and live in such a way as if you
yeah,
were to eternally recur, it would be you would be content to affirm that. And it's like, well, why? Like,
this
oh yeah,
is, well,
all you
see,
need is like one question. You can just keep asking why, and eventually it comes to like, oh, well, this is all just arbitrary. And at that point, I'm
yeah,
just like, well, that's like verbal diarrhea. Like, I'm not interested in hearing prescriptions are if you don't have like and a foundational moral theory to kind of to support them, I suppose.
yeah. Well, see,
I
this
mean,
is
I
the,
am interested in like people that don't have explicitly laid out moral theories, but it's you know what I mean?
I do. I mean, I think though, see, this is the like continental, loosey goose, rock and roll shit, perspective here, talking here. But I mean, when I think about like, like Nietzsche's, like, I almost want to put thought in quotes because him and I think cats like Deleuze, I mean, they're like trying to come up with just new forms of thought, like a new, like not new things that you can think, but what thought even is. Like, I mean, if you're Nietzsche, you're talking about like this Ubermensch that's like, it's not just like some guy that's like less of a pussy, like we're talking like some 10,000 year time scale of like post-human, like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Well, I just get it
what
as like a
thought
complete,
is, you know?
it's an aspirational ideal based on like the complete emancipation of yourself from from tradition and convention and from uh, systems of more like previous systems of morality. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, but I think it's
And
like,
yeah, to like be meaningful, to live meaningfully, while also denying all like heretofore established moral conventions.
yeah. I mean, but I think he's like trying to prepare us for just some thing where it's not even like it's post-human, transhuman, whatever you want to call it, where it's like thought and action aren't even the same type of thing. I mean, it's like some sci
Yeah.
movie
Okay.
where it's like some sci-fi movie where the alien is just some sound and like the color blue or some shit. Like it's not, it's not like, oh, what can people know or think? Like, so I mean, this is why I like Nietzsche, because I mean, it's just, this is like, they're like not, it's like non-falsifiable claims, it's like cryptic little fucking
Yeah,
aphorisms.
and I like him too. Like, I to put my cards on the table. I think he's a bad philosopher, like systemically. Like he's like sloppy and like his reasoning is not really precise. But like I think he's a good writer and like a wise figure and maybe even a prophet of sorts. Like there is insight
Yeah,
to be gained from it. I just like don't really respect it on the level of like a systematic philosophy. And I think that these types of these are like different genres of
yeah. No, I mean, systematic. I mean, he would think that that's just systems are just gauche, man. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't even know if I like philosophy, man. If you're like, oh
huh.
yeah, I like Nietzsche, Bataille, Deleuze, but not difference in repetition because it's too boring. I mean, that's like the one of his stuff that is kind of philosophy, like
So like my
Heraclitus. Like, is that? I mean, I sit around reading like Heraclitus aphorisms and stuff. Like, is that really like philosophy? Like, I don't
hmm.
know, man. It's in the philosophy section at like Barnes and Noble, but like, I don't. Um,
So
I
I
mean,
would feel like my critique of like, and you talked about this in the beginning, and I wanted to touch on this, but like the idea of like truth seeking versus just like exploring like different systems of thought. I am very,
systems. Man. I'm talking about thought, not systems of thought. Just
or
thought.
yeah, yeah, just like
The,
different ways of thinking, perhaps
the
like
act of, well, Deleuze talks
different
about the
different genders of thinking. I don't know. Like,
yeah. No, I mean, like Deleuze talks about like an image of thought, like trying to come up with like a new image of thought. You
mhm.
know, I kind of
Hmm.
get that a little bit from Fred Moten. I don't know. Do you fuck with Moten at all?
I have no idea who that is, to
He
tell you the
gets
truth.
you check him out. Yeah, he's really interesting. But I kind of cut you off though, man. Yeah, you were saying,
Oh yeah. So to that point, like I feel that that these when you allow for arbitrariness in your moral system, you have nothing against like someone who's like, well, actually, my belief is that everyone should be massacring toddlers with a chainsaw, or like the exact opposite of what you think is like the most grievous thing, like that someone that would support that, right? And I think in epistemology, the similar principle would apply. That when you open that door to arbitrariness, I mean, you create problems, and I mean, I'm very partisan to like the idea that like we should be like seeking truth in the absolute sense, and like the different like exploring like different genders of thinking or pictures of thinking or whatever is a very fruitful process. But like on some level, like if everything's not based on an overarching like a very rigorous demanding system of thought, then it's kind of like, well, like why should I? We all assert things, you know what I mean? Like we're on the stream or in our everyday lives making assertions about the world and how it is, and like I feel like all of these should be grounded in an absolute system of truth, because otherwise, like, what does the assertion mean if it doesn't like posit like the way things are? If it's just like a little like a poem or like an angle for looking at reality, like how can I really engage with that in a holistic way? You know what I mean?
because it's all just becomings, man. It's
Uh-huh.
just flow, man. This is the thing. I just like stuff. I don't even like know stuff or believe stuff. I just like your
Mhm.
desire, your thirst for absolute systems. I like it.
Mhm.
I
Oh, thank
don't.
you.
I'm not doing it myself.
Uh-huh.
I'm not. Uh, You know what I'm saying? Like I don't
Mm.
do it. I'm not arguing for or against it. I find it aesthetically appealing that
Mhm.
you want that, you know?
Mhm.
Um, yeah. I mean, I always bring everything back to look, you know, I tend to bring things back to music and my creative practice because that's the area where it's like oh shit, we've got
Oh
comments.
yeah, I'm just showing these now that we're getting my
Oh, you can bring them up. Oh,
you
thoughts
want
on
to take
Earth.
a break and talk about Younger? I
Younger
so
is fucking cool, man. I've only
yeah.
read that one that I can't pronounce, Oomsville, or
Oh,
the
Amishville, right?
Oomishville, the one with the Anarch.
I have not read that. I have not yet been able to acquire a copy. I know that that Moldbug recommends that very heartily.
Telos
But I
Press, talking about Telos. Telos Press puts out
oh cool.
yeah. There's a lot of
I'll yeah, I'll look into it. That's a I've read Storm of Steel, which is pretty good. It's a good like war memoir. It has like a certain I don't know. It has the jouissance. It has
dude. Show me
it's
your relationship to pain, and I will show you what you are.
is that from Storm of Steel?
That's from On Pain. It's just
Oh.
like so fucking hard.
Oh right, yeah. No, I want to. That's on my list too.
Yeah,
Horatius and the Lead says Forest Passage is phenomenal too. I haven't really decided what relationship I want to have with like the super chats in this, in this show. But we're just trying different things. It's a good.
well, this thing about the Anarch, though, I mean, this thing from Umishville, I mean, this idea of the Anarch, I mean, I won't like expound on it, but this this idea of like being like being like not an anarchist but an anarch, like sort of taking the vibe of like destroying all systems and not participating in systems, but like actually kind of like, oh shit, you should have this guy on the podcast, but
Oh
just
yeah.
to have that anarchy be like some kind of sovereign way of being that is like just existential, like in yourself. I don't know, it's I took a lot of inspiration from that book. In particular, actually, not that I can totally articulate it, but it gave me some inspiration for how to exist during our
Oh,
cultural
wow.
movement, where everyone hates each other. My friends hate each other. You know, I'm losing friends. I'm gaining new ones. Everyone thinks everyone else wants to, just fucking what's going on now.
Mhm.
It gave me a little inspiration for how to like exist in the world, in this sort of in the world but not too much of it,
Hmm.
it's like I don't know, was that like wit
Wow.
was
No,
it
that makes me want to read it. That's
it,
yeah. I really
oh,
wish I could
dog
say
dog
more about Oimishville. I really haven't read it, or I don't even really know what the premise is. So,
it's fucking based, man. It's just like, yeah, he calls himself he wants to be an obstacle. I enjoyed that, just being an
oh
obstacle.
wow,
It's
yeah, that sounds awesome. And
but yeah,
also like biographically, I love Younger. I feel like a kinship with him. He's like this. Yeah, I always aspire to live to be 100 years old, 102 to
oh
be
yeah,
exact. I
dude.
don't remember how old he was when he died, but no, like I remember when I was when I was 9 or 10 years old, I think my great grandmother died. But before that, she was like, she had her legs amputated. She was in a wheelchair, and she was like old as shit. But like, she was so majestic, and I think she was 92 when she died. And her, after church, every time I would go to like their little Methodist church, I would I would see everyone crowd around, all of her descendants, her like dozens of descendants, like crowd around her wheelchair. And she was like very much like the center of life. And also, she was so extraordinary because she had like this accent, which is like hillbilly. My dad's family talks hillbilly kind of, but it was so old. It was so archaic. Like it sounded like you could hear the trace of German in it. It's like how the Amish talk.
Right, accents that don't exist anymore, like
Yeah,
fucking
like like old like Pennsylvania Dutch where you can still hear like the residual like traces of German. That was the way she talked, and she had like a very crisp like golden voice. And so I think it's that experience of her having her as my great grandmother that really it makes me want to be like old as shit, which is
Mhm.
probably not a probably not, the odds are not in my favor, because my um paternal grandfather's side has a tendency to die of heart attacks in their 50s. So
Oh,
and
yeah.
then and my mom's side is diabetic, and I and I but I love what biographically, what resonates with me about Ernst Jünger is that he's someone who beat the odds like so many times over. That
Yes,
like
yes.
he
He
was
did.
not only was he in like the deadliest war in European history and like had like all of these near death experiences, then he like fucked around with Hitler, but not for libtard reasons, but for like esoteric, like aristocratic reasons. He hated Hitler, and like
Hating it from above, Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. He was like,
Right.
"Oh, well, the way Hitler is too middlebrow or something."
Well, that's the way my dad hates Trump. Like he hates Trump, but it's like because Trump's like new money. You know what I mean?
I feel like a lot of it is like based on that there is like a kind of like cultural like disdain for the ways
Yeah.
that he expresses himself, and some philosophers and like essayists will try to like bridge the gap between being middlebrow or like being like gauche and like genocide. I think it's a pretty I think it's a pretty weak relationship if it exists at all. This is the point of have you ever read Sam Criss? I talked about him on an episode of The Beautiful Toilet.
No, no, but yeah, no, my friend, do you know Xylon?
Yeah, you've had him on your stream, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Them. I had them on my
Oh,
stream.
sorry, my bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Isn't it? Yeah, it's Xylon's them, but like so fucking like edgy and like like Xylon doesn't fit into the Xylon's like
Oh,
a
okay. Yeah, I know. I understand.
huge,
I have a
huge.
friend who's also similarly gender nonconforming, but like in a weird way, not in the
Yeah,
normal.
you called him him. I mean, but he's
Yeah.
like
No, no, it's just I remember seeing the name, but I don't recall the which particular
you would
episode.
fucking love it. Anyway, whatever. I'm not even they love Sam Criss. Anyway, so what? So yeah,
Oh,
what's
I love Sam Criss too. Like he's like one of my favorite contemporary writers. Full stop. I I think that like I've criticized him before. I think that his essay about Alain de Botton, the I guess he's like a Swiss or Belgian like pop philosopher. Have you ever seen like those School of Life videos on YouTube?
no.
Oh, he does like really goofy, like middle brow, like you know, how self improvement style, like summaries of philosophy, like.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Practical philosophy, yeah.
and Sam Criss just has like this vicious essay where he's just like, imagine what it would look like if this ugly son of a bitch fucked. Imagine how hideous his bald head would look while he's fucking. And then it like goes on to like make this argument that because Bhutan is like a lousy philosopher and because he has like these kind of like self-help platitudes and bases his worldview off of this, apparently, that this is of the same essence as like the death camps. And I think that when a lot of like leftists or liberals talk about Hitler, they do kind of like draw on this idea that like he was tacky, and also tackiness is kind of genocidal, like if you think about it. And I think
Right.
that's like a big thing in like certain schools of like in like the Frankfurt School and like certain schools of continental philosophy. And I always feel like it's a little bit glib and a little bit
Oh yeah,
you're just like
totally.
kind of grouping in like your social, like your class prejudices in with like your political disdain.
No, no, completely, man, completely. That's yeah, yeah.
But
It's not just the genocide is it's not just the genocide is like is low class. It's that being low class is genocidal. It's not even low class though. It's
being like tacky, like
being like lower middle class, like right, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's
No,
like
it's like being tacky or being gauche is like inherently like genocidal or whatever. Being like, I mean, bourgeois, right? Like to get like the real when they say bourgeois, this is effectively what they mean 99% of the time. I think your bourgeois values are showing or whatever. Even
yeah.
the way they're talking about that submarine that's currently sinking right now, like, oh, these people are tacky because like they have so much money and they went into this like shady vessel, and that therefore like that justifies being glib about the fact that they're like currently in great danger and probably like under extreme pressure and discomfort and
Yeah.
fear right now, but like
We hate.
because this is a tacky thing that tacky people do, it's like okay to make fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's always got to be some escape valve for people's sadism, and like a
Yeah.
bunch of billionaires in a submarine is a good low hanging fruit for everyone to just pour their sadism out,
Really, I mean, I don't really think that there should really be an escape valve.
No, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying like
it's like, yeah, it makes sense.
I think that's what's happening. Yeah, I'm not. I don't think it's cool that those people are fucking dying, and I don't think it's cool that people are laughing about it. But
right.
But I'm saying that's how people are.
I mean, I guess you talk about cruelty earlier, and I say like I don't really think that cruelty is inherently good or bad, like because I would reject. I am like pretty extreme about like rejecting subjective hedonic states of being as like moral factors. Like I would take a pretty radical position that like suffering is not worse than pleasure, and it's kind of counterintuitive. And I acknowledge that like my intuition, predisposes me to think differently about it. But I just think that in the pursuit of like the absolute truth or whatever, like I just don't see a reason why these things should factor in.
What should factor in then? Because before you answer, I mean, I think most people, like without getting too deep on like what do we mean by nihilism, I think just your average just conversational use of the word nihilism.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people, if they just heard us having conversation and I was just like, cruelty's bad, and you were like, it's not necessarily good or bad, or something like you said, like most people would be like, you're the nihilist, you're being nihilistic or whatever, because you're like relativizing everything or something. But
because like my moral like position doesn't really it doesn't really account, it doesn't really weigh pleasure or suffering or cruelty as factors. I guess like I would say that like the method that I would use is the one that I would prescribe as like the epistemically correct one, and like the correct like meta-ethical method, right? And I feel like not using that like creates it allows for arbitrariness in a way that I find nihilistic. And even I think that maybe a lot of the reason why, I think that probably the main reason why I can't really think of any other why someone would like use hedonism in their calculation, why they would say that like suffering is bad, is because it's intuitive and I don't need a reason. It just is. It's part of, or maybe to like give a more charitable, more expansive view of it. It's because there's something innate to our humanity where to not take this premise for granted is a violation of our nature. I would say that those foundations are very tenuous at best, and that because it opens the door for arbitrariness, like because I would apply like the same kind of razor to this kind of statement where well, pleasure is better than suffering, or suffering is inherently bad, like and I'm not even going to shy away from like grievous suffering is inherently bad, like starvation or whatever, like something.
I feel you. I mean, I don't. See, the thing is, I said cruelty, not suffering.
Okay.
But no, but you're right to align them because whatever, it's like causing.
Because cruelty would probably be like the inflicting of suffering on an unwilling person, right?
For
fun, even on a willing person.
But saying cruel. I mean, saying cruelty. It's not just the act; it's also the intention behind it. It means I'm like enjoying it or something. But I mean, who would not say that suffering is bad is our boy Ernst Jünger would be like, dude, like this literally makes you a man. I mean, dude,
yeah.
I mean, what we now call trauma used to be like considered just like an initiatory like rite into like being like a man or whatever, like it's like literally like what we now call PTSD was just like welcome to the world of fucking men,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, so it's like, and it seems like we've put that in the past, like, no, that's fucked up. But we say trauma is bad, etc. But then people talk about their trauma and they're like, it made me who I am. Like it builds character. I am who I am. So it's like, are we even actually trying to get rid of it? I mean, like, just like, I don't know. But no, but back to this thing. But see, you're talking about this thing about like morals and stuff, like morality. You're saying that, okay. I got to seize on some shit you said, because I don't disagree, but it needs to be explained like a lot more. Okay, well, yeah, you're saying that what's nihilistic is an arbitrariness, right? You're like, there's something nihilistic about just being like cruelty's bad because it just feels like it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
I get what you mean. How it's not grounded in something more than just a feeling in my feels and shit. But
it allows like arbitrariness, and then you kind of create a system where you could pretty much say anything, and it's very destabilizing. Yeah,
I feel that. Or I mean, it's even if it's not nihilistic, you're just saying it's not substantial enough. It's not
it's prone to, like, I think if you extrapolate that method, like, you really have no
well, it's not
foundation to oppose nihilism,
Yeah, it's basically just like a non-method. But but I still don't get, though. You're always like, you keep saying like epistemic method, or using the word epistemic a lot. So what would that mean? Like what? I mean, because you keep like demanding a certain kind of rigor, but I don't. What would be an example of that? I mean, what, like, do you have moral principles that you've deduced from some kind of rigorous epistemic like thing? I just like
kind of, yeah. I mean, like, I can't take credit for it. I'm deferring to greater minds than myself, like Descartes and like Leibniz and like Augustine and Scotus for a lot of my value theory. But I would say that, like, I mean, basically, I mean, I could start like from scratch. It might be a little bit complicated, or it might be not complicated, but it might be a little, a lot to talk about. But like,
tell me something that's wrong to do and why and how you got there. And if you don't have an answer, that's cool, because I wouldn't have pressed you on this if you hadn't kind of.
Yeah, well, I would say, okay, like, murdering someone is wrong. Like, taking an innocent life is like flatly, like, morally incorrect, period, no exceptions.
Right.
Or actively taking a life, to be as precise as possible. And that is because it's it privates someone of being, which is like the ultimate good. And that comes from it comes from it does require assumptions on like the absolute level of epistemology, where you have to assume, like, I also look at epistemology from the perspective of are you familiar with Munchausen's trilemma?
No.
This is a really mind-blowing concept for me, where basically the argument is that all systems will collapse to one of three seemingly undesirable terminal points. Either you can just have an arbitrary assumption. It is because it is, or it is because I said so. Or it will collapse to an infinite regress, where it's like, this is because X is because Y, Z is because Y, etc. Or circular reasoning, where one thing justifies another thing which is contingent on that, and the first thing is contingent on the second. That there's no way out of this. I think it's even like there are like proofs for it and everything, that this is kind of
isn't the third thing kind of like the first, or no? I mean,
I think they all kind of are like the first thing, because to propose like an infinite regress as like a system is to propose like this thing is because, like, this whole structure, this infinite regress is and it is because I said so, or it is because I don't need a reason. And then the circular reasoning is also kind of the first thing, because it is just proposing like two things that that are
It's like
dependent on
one,
each other.
two,
The whole
right?
system itself is kind of the arbitrary assertion. So yeah, I think that there's on some level you kind of can't get away from that arbitrariness. And my solution to that would be you just take a set, take some assumptions. Take in the case of Descartes, it's I think therefore I am. You want to use as few assumptions as possible because each assumption has X probability of being wrong, right?
Okay.
And then take those assumptions and build them out into a worldview, and then do it with another set of assumptions, as many as you can, and then test them for internal consistency and explanatory power. Test them against each other by that method, and in that way, I think you can kind of you can control the arbitrariness in a systematic way
By having more assumptions, wouldn't you want to have as
by
few?
having fewer.
But right, okay. Oh, you mean take things that you do.
I
You're
think
saying
we should assume as little as possible, and it should be on a very high level. So, for example, Descartes starts everything with "I think, therefore I am,"
yes, yeah,
and he claims everything in his system is built up from that one axiom. I think that as far as axioms go, that's a pretty good one to have. What's that?
Isaac, could you imagine coming up with that? Like how fucking deep that is? Like that's like a guy.
Yeah, no, people shit on Descartes a lot. But I think his method is the correct one. And, people can nitpick about like certain conclusions or whatever, but I think that this is like the correct way to do epistemology. And I always, tip my hat to him for that. But he gets a very bad rap these days, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah. I don't hear people talking about it much.
But
different that style, but
that's one assumption. And I think that you can build a pretty stable, like pretty coherent worldview from an assumption of that nature, I also think there's another epistemological method, and I'm not really not method, but another, starting assumption, which is just, phenomena exist. God created it, it's like that the creator is like the first premise rather than like you as like the agent. And I think that you can extrapolate a pretty coherent worldview from both of these. And I also feel like they start to converge on each other. And if that's the case, then things that are downstream, it would kind of serve as, it would actually vindicate both as epistemological methods. If you've come up with the worldview and they kind of start to converge on each other from what seem like pretty reasonable, like axioms, from very simple and reasonable axioms, and you can build up from that, and you kind of arrive at roughly the same thing, then that probably means you're onto something,
it's hard for me to totally get this without like examples, you know what I mean? And it's okay if we don't have them because
So in terms of morality, I would say like the kind of like Platonic moral theory can proceed from like either the like God axiom or from the cogito ergo sum axiom. That like there's let me think. So by the chain of reasoning that I talked about earlier, where at the very minimum, existence is a precondition for moral reasoning. Therefore, if value exists, it's a precondition that you must be. I also think that, I also have like a pretty expansive, like a radical, like Scotist view of the nature of God, where God is not just like, where God is completely unbounded from the strictures of reason or internal consistency, and like all of like these governing structures, like logic and these universal qualities, they exist purely by the will of God. They're not, he's not beholden to them in any way. And in fact, like that is kind of, sorry, I'm digressing a little bit too much, but because of that, like creation itself is a prescription because it implies it's better to be than not to be.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you had the thing. You had that thing about how it's like morally. Yes, it's better to be than not to be,
And I
and
think you can pretty easily work up from that to a system of teleology, first of all. And
yeah,
also like pretty basic things like murder is obviously like a privation of someone's being. If you acknowledge that this is like an agent with like an internal epistemic
yeah. But
reality.
I know, but murder. I mean, it's like I don't mean to be this fucking guy, but self-defense, or what if he fucking molested your kid, or what if blah blah blah. I mean, there's all these. I mean, like, I shouldn't even say that about revenge or whatever, but just on some
Well,
self.
that's like those would apply to killing, but I mean, I guess like by definition, like murder is an unjust killing, which is kind of yeah, it
Right,
could
that's not, like that's what I'm saying. It
maybe
already.
start,
But
it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier when we talk about lying, and it's like one of the ways out of this dilemma is to just deny that not telling the truth in a given situation is a lie, which sounds kind of like a cop out. But I
it
think
is.
in the case of murder, like it's pretty easy to justify like the situations where killing is not an act of murder, like self-defense. It's like, well, you're really like defending against like a pre-existing aggression against an attempt to private you of your being. So
Yeah, no.
or
I know.
defense of the innocence like would be like compulsory because that person, first of all, they're acting in a lower teleological threshold. They're not in they're not upholding their telos, and their lack of so doing is threatening someone else's ability to do so.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that like the death penalty for like child molesters, I would probably, I don't know if I would be in favor of like vigilante like killing someone that molested your child. I know it's that it's very base, but I actually don't know if it's like a good thing.
I
And I'm
hadn't thought about.
pretty iffy on the death penalty in general.
I hadn't thought about it in years until really recently. I just assumed that I was against. Like it was so out of my mind. And then just recently, I was like, no. But then
Yeah.
recently, I was like, what if we had universal health care, a crazy robust welfare state, and a brutal death penalty for any violent crime? Like everything above like
I
minor
mean,
assault, just immediate fucking decapitation.
like
I was
Singapore.
What's that? Yeah, like seriously, just weird combinations of policy that like nobody proposes, like just total lefty, like touchy feely shit. But then it's just like you abolish prisons by just killing anyone who does anything above like littering.
Well, yeah, I've heard that, but I mean, I have like friends that would say like, they're prison abolitionists because they would say you determine can this person be rehabilitated or not, and if they can't, then you remove them from life.
I know. I mean,
Yeah, maybe they would even characterize it as an act of mercy to that person,
it,
or
it, it, it
um,
it opens up such like genocidal type shit, but it's like I don't know. But
but I'm actually pretty. I have very mixed feelings about the death penalty in general, and I think that part of my reluctance about it comes from like this privation theory and like the belief that it actually is better to exist in any form than not to exist at all. And so like it's better to like create a race war inside of a concrete box and put someone in that than to just like extinguish their light. And like it's like the feelings of the victim don't really account for it to me. Like I think that that's just sentiment. That's not really like a moral position. So, but on the
also,
other hand, I've kind of come around to the idea that like it is a good thing for like sustaining a society where you harden yourself to inflict like brutal and like necessary justice, and that to step away from that obligation kind of it puts you in a position of being weak in the face of injustice, and that it's just a habit, like a hardness of heart against like criminals, against like people who like inflict evil upon society, that is good to cultivate. And so I'm kind of like mixed about, the death penalty in general. And I would probably lean against doing vigilante justice to someone that molested your child.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. I think Junger. I loved it. Now I'm just gonna be thinking Junger the whole time. Junger would probably be like, you know what? Entering the race war in the concrete box, be a bracing, sort of invigorating, ennobling of the male spirit. But like, okay, so
I don't really feel like that's the outcome of it though. Like, I feel like people that come out of the prison system are very privated. And I mean, I do have the sense that maybe like conflict and like war and like being challenged for its own sake might actually not be the best way to like fully realize your telos.
Well, I wanted to come back to
I'm
that.
very sympathetic to the point, by the way. Sorry, please continue.
No, but I did want to come back to that telos thing, man, because this is some of the more appealing things that you've said so far on the topic of like ethics and shit. It's just like this thing of like that being is better than non-being, and part of being, the good of being, is to fulfill your telos, but it's like, but you know, so part of your moral obligation is to figure out what your telos is. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess like that's kind of a precondition that underlies the whole thing. You know, it's interesting. I talked to, I was kind of doing the meta ethics talk as I want to do sometimes with my friend Nick Dove. I don't know if you met him, but he's also been on The Beautiful Toilet, and you know, giant, like 7 foot tall man, very brilliant. And but you know, we were talking about this, and he kind of said, like, really, well, like, don't you think like by getting rid of like those sentimental considerations, or not giving credence to those sentimental considerations in morality, that you're encouraging us to be something less than human, or like, you know, and or like that you deny like humanism? And I don't really see it that way at all, because I feel like those like sentimental considerations are maybe one step removed from like mere animal appetite, you know. But like what's uniquely human is our ability to reason and kind of like come to like conclusions about like truth, and like higher order truths about the universe and about our purpose and morality.
Yeah, no. I feel this. I feel this. Isn't it kind of like some like Eastern, like Taoist kind of vibe of being that, like, you know, you have a nature and then there's like a way of things, and you have to like accord, you know, like steer yourself into this accord of like harmony, right? Of of like, or maybe not. I haven't read much of that kind of stuff, but
yeah, I think no, I think that there's a. I actually have a book called Christ the Eternal Tao, which is written by like a very trad Orthodox monk. Like it's about like how Taoism like presages Christianity in a similar way that Platonism does in the West. And you know, it's not like a fluffy like new age religious syncretism at all. It's like a very hard line like Orthodox monk who's just like, well, if you look at it, like Taoism has like a very like Christian like metaphysical premises, more so than other East Asian belief systems. I feel like nothing could really be farther from Christianity than Buddhism at its core.
right. Well, accepting suffering with grace, I think, would be like a kind of like a
well, I would say that I would think that Buddhism maintains that suffering is inherently bad, and that it's an illusion, and that like by you know, you should cultivate indifference. Like I would feel like Christianity, the Christian tradition, is more characterized by leaning into like suffering and trying to approach it joyfully, whereas like Buddhism is about like detachment from it, you know, and like empty. They both have like a focus on emptying yourself out, but like in Christianity, it's to like be full, like filled with Christ and like with like greater things. Whereas I feel like in Buddhism, like the emptiness is its own end.
right. Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. But I'm not sure if Buddhism's thing is that suffering's bad, but in any case, this thing about like telos though, it's like, I mean, so there's an assumption there, right? You're like, you don't like the assumptions. So that's an assumption that everything has a telos, you know, that there's a.
Well, I think that the telos like does like proceed from like the creator, right? Like from the existence of God. And
Another presupposition, which
like
I'm
not well, no, it's you know, I mean, I think that that could be like the core assumption. Like I said, that is one. You know, you can also get to God from I think therefore I am. Like that's what Descartes attempts to do. I think there's different like approaches to that, and that gets really technical, and it's a little bit over my head. But I don't think it's impossible in concept. And so like the idea that that you know, either things exist therefore creator, or you know, I exist, and then creators maybe like a few steps above, you know, further down like the chain of reasoning.
like intelligent design, like watchmaker shit, right? I mean, right? Essentially. I
so
mean,
yeah, then
or no, or
like
clock.
also like the idea that like teleology. I mean, you can kind of reduce teleology also to like sustainable forms of being. Like that in order to like preserve being, in order to like continue to uphold it and to be internally like logically consistent with it, there are certain actions um which are internally consistent and which are like sustainable and like reflective of that like you know, valorization of being itself. And there are certain things which aren't, and I think that like teleology can also be expressed in that, you know, that like in some ways you could be acting against uh like a being by, I mean, there's an example that comes to mind, and I don't want to use it because it's like it's kind of like a controversial, like touchy culture war thing. But like, you know, just in isolation, like
No,
the
no
Catholic
abortion and
argument.
no trans. Or are we?
No, no, it's the gay thing, right? Like the idea that like in Catholic like moral theology, it's like sodomy is considered a sin because it's like a privation of being, that like by not having like you're not like procreating, you're using the
Right.
instrument for its like contingent ends, and it's like it actually is a really good example of natural law, but of course like it's a whole can of worms unto itself.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's shit we maybe could avoid. I mean, not that I would get mad, but just that it would be
Right, right.
it would be.
No, that's why I'm saying it's like kind of it kind of sucks because it's like a good example, but it's also like too like hot for YouTube, you know?
No, I mean it's I mean I just I would disagree with you on a level that it is just like it would become somewhat unproductive, I think. But
Uh-huh.
but well, but I mean you could explain the Catholic point of view, I
Right,
suppose.
right. That's what I mean. Like just that, like I
Go
mean, you
ahead.
know, Dante has what's in the Divine Comedy. He has like a circle of hell, which is really bizarrely organized, but it makes sense if you think about the argument, where it's people like are running around in laps forever. They don't want to, and it's two types of people: sodomites and usurers.
And and and
Which
and and YouTubers?
usurers, people who do
Usurers.
usury. Which
Usurers.
is
Okay.
weird, right? Like that's a very bizarre category. Like
Well, yeah, I
sex,
mean,
like you
they can
know.
be collapsed into one group, a lot of people would say, but yeah.
But like his reasoning for that is that like, you know, sodomy is like to try to extract like the pleasure from like the sex act without like the fullness of its purpose, which is like procreation. And usury is kind of the like financial equivalent of that, where it's like trying to extract monetary value without like building anything, you know, without actually creating anything.
Yeah, you
And
don't want
it's
to
like,
use the word capitalism because you're not a left-wing person, but that's what
well, I
they
mean, I think it's anachronistic too, and it's not really like I don't really think it's the same thing either. Although I guess like the capitalist system is kind of inherently built on usury in one form or another.
it's
But
literally what it is. Yeah, it's just
yeah,
money
yeah,
from
yeah,
money.
like the lending of money, and like I don't really have like a strong stance on like whether usury like charging interest is absolutely unconditionally wrong or only like you know, unjust charging of interest. I think there's pretty, I mean, it's hard to imagine like the whole economic system like without like
Yeah, yeah,
usury, like
yeah,
within like it's like soft form, you know. But
yeah.
whatever, I, you know,
Well,
I wish.
I mean, look, I will say this, you know, I mean, as pro-gay as I am, etc. I mean, it is like, yeah, if you take sexual pleasure and just completely decouple it from like anything higher, and you have just like
Mhm,
utterly like unleashed hedonism, it's been
mhm.
bad. That's been bad for society, for people.
Well,
Just
one of
like
the,
total fucking hedonism, no strictures on sexuality on any level, even on a vibe level. It's
hmm.
uh, it's not good. It's not good. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is kind of like observable, but like that's also like not really the way that I approach. I mean, I also think one of the advantages of like the hardness and like the unchangingness of like the Catholic stance is that it's you know, very demanding on like straight people too. You know, it's like, yeah, the conditions under which you can have straight sex are like legitimately are very demanding. You know, you have to be married first of all, which isn't really like a natural law thing so much as like, I mean, I guess it does come from natural law, but it's not like as directly as like the reproductive requirement, but but like you can't use like contraception,
Right. Right.
you can't you can't do non-procreative sex acts even with your wife, and like that there is like a consistency to it that I think that is lost by like a lot of Protestant denominations that might be like, well, like gay sex is wrong, but birth control is fine, or masturbation is fine, or whatever.
Right. But like, I mean, okay, but like natural law, I mean, this is a presupposition, I mean,
Well, I'm saying that it proceeds from like the theory of being, that
the theory
like
of like
sustainable being.
existing within your fulfilling your telos or whatever. But I mean, if your main telos is just to create, if the only thing that's good is being, or if that's our only assumption, right?
Yeah.
We're like, we're trying to only keep it to that assumption.
Yeah. That's what I try to do. Yeah.
But so then it's like, okay, so then things that strike at being, so then it's like the only thing that's good, or the only thing you can definitely say is good, is to create more being, is to just generate life.
So like I think that this is where like the like maybe not even like the religious angle, but just like the natural law could also say like, well, you are not like fully like realized as like what you are. You're not being like, even Nietzsche says like, his maxim is become what you are.
Yeah.
And
yeah. No, dude,
it kind of like invokes like the same thing where it's like the like certain actions, even if they don't directly like thwart life or like result in less life, absolutely, like the life itself is not like fully realized in like the fullness of its like prescribed qualities,
Yeah.
And that like to be like hooked up to like a simulation of like the most fulfilled life, and like fed from a feeding tube in your corporeal body while your imagination is going on adventures and like saving children from burning buildings. Like that's extremely privated. um you still exist, but it's just but I think we understand, I hate to say intuitively, but like you know what I mean. It's it's an
I
example
don't care
where,
how sloppy you get with the presuppositions. I mean, but I'm interested in how much you can
no,
make.
I'm holding myself to my own standard, but I think that it's understood that like that you can understand how that would be privated, even though you still technically exist, but you're not really like in the fullness of your being.
Yeah. Well, you're also not right. I mean, well, right. I mean, it's like you can't go around claiming that you know what everyone's telos is, but probably someone's telos is not to be hooked up to the feeding tube in the VR glasses. I mean, I got a question for you, man. Do you think I haven't laid down a whole lot of like, I think this, I think that. I've been more responsive.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I might have
Well,
like
I don't care to. No, I don't care to. I'm actually very happy to be more responsive than generative in this conversation, which is kind of how I thought it might be. Anyway, because you were kind of like calling the tune that we are playing, but I just out of curiosity, and I won't be offended one way or the other. But I mean, do you find my disposition towards this stuff nihilistic? Like, does my general vibe smack of nihilism to you?
So, I think one of the best challenges I've gotten is from a friend of mine who he likes G. Moore, who I think is like the poopiest philosopher who ever lived. And his argument to like a lot of like hard Cartesian, like, how do I know that my hand exists in front of my face? Well, I see it there. Of course it exists, which I think is just like, oh, come on. Like, but my friend who like subscribes to the system, he said like, so do you believe that like people are like morally wrong if they don't like consider everything from like a really like rigorous system of epistemology that you do? And I mean, I guess like I don't think that I'm better than a Polish babushka that, or bachi or whatever, that like is a pious like fervent Catholic and like contributor to her church community, even though she's not like engaging with these discourses, you know what I mean? And that's like a real problem that I find. And I guess I would make the distinction between like there's procedural correctness, and then there are habits and like thoughts that like yeah, there's like the procedural correctness, and it's like maybe there are different like methods to get at the good, but I also feel like none of them can contradict in their pure form like a procedurally correct epistemology. Um, I think that like being like epistemologically correct is probably not like the easiest or most effective way to become good, you know. But it is necessary in an analysis of it, and I think that people should at the very least be open to and curious about the truth, like higher order truths about the world. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Does that
yeah.
answer the question?
Uh, sort of. I mean, I like it. Yeah, kind of, because uh,
Like,
right.
I think you're a good guy. Like, I
I,
mean, without even like getting, I mean, I guess for the sake of example, I'll just say like you seem like a very, you're a stand-up guy. You're
yeah,
like
I know.
reliable.
Yeah,
But like,
we
like,
definitely,
but
we
like,
definitely morally approve. We definitely morally approve of each other. But I was just wondering if
right.
you
But
thought
it's
that
like, how can you be that? Like, the paradox that I have to contend with is like, how can you be that when you're kind of like disinterested in what I would think would be the correct procedure for
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
coming to that conclusion? And honestly, I feel like I have to ask that question of like most of the saints, even to take you out of it, like, and I don't really know. I mean, I think that what's good can never contradict the truth. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
truth, the good is kind of contingent from the truth, because there's like if you assert something is good or bad, then you're making a truth statement, and to say that, you posit that that statement is correct, and you know what I mean? Like, it's just so I think that the cultivation of virtue is not usually downstream from like the pursuit of truth, although I think the pursuit of truth is one virtue among many, but like
Yeah.
it can never contradict like the whole system. It can never contradict like philosophy and theology and like just like what's absolute.
Okay. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I mean, you definitely are. You definitely are. Um, yeah, like you said with the Polish, not babu, like a Russian would be babushka, right? Or whatever. You talk about like the old lady who just gives to her church and lives properly, without thinking, without doing these epistemological steps and shit. I mean, because this is how I'm living, man. I mean, it's like just. I mean, as an artist doing what I do, man, it's like uh, when things are hitting, it's like you really can't tell me shit. You
Well,
know what I
maybe like the pursuit of truth can be like non-dialectical. I don't know. I mean, I'm hesitant to
mean?
to endorse that, but
This
like,
this shit of acting in accordance with your telos. I know what that feels like.
mhm,
I know what that is. You know what I mean?
mhm.
And it's for me, it's not downstream from anything other than just some complicated, weird convergence of intuition and planning and sort of not and this and dreams and fucking with the guitar and like what have it's
Mhm.
like and then there are just these acts which are just very clearly
Well,
mine.
I would think that like you making music, it's morally good, but it's not morally compulsory. If you were to decide like,
Yeah, no, it
I'm
is.
not, I'm done making music tomorrow, I wouldn't think that you have committed a sin or like a moral evil by so doing.
I no, I absolutely would have. That would be that.
Really?
Yeah.
Like Aquinas, like he refused to finish the Summa Theologica because he said like he had a great like mystical like epiphany, and he concluded like he's like, oh, whatever, this like great work that I've started, that I've almost finished, all this is just straw. He said, like he basically said it was like the straw that animals shit on, like compared to like the kingdom of God. And like I think that these are all, I don't know. I mean,
Well, I
I'm
guess
not trying to sell you short in your musical career.
I could change my mind, I suppose. I mean, like,
Right, right.
I don't know, but I like,
Like it seems like that is like a way that you're doing good in the world as it stands, but like, is it, like you could, I guess like it would be maybe not inherently evil, but like privated of sorts to turn your attention away from music towards lesser things. If you decided you were really into World of Warcraft,
Yeah, I mean,
actually, I would be willing to say that that's probably evil. To
well,
if you stop making music because of World of
well,
Warcraft,
just shit that I'm less, just shit that's less part of my telos or my nature. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I love boxing. If I
Yeah.
fucking dropped music to focus full time on boxing, that
Hmm.
would be absolutely privation, man. You know what I
Huh.
mean? I'd get better at
You
boxing.
know, Deschamps gave up art because he got really into chess. I mean, he's probably a lot of people would probably say that he's a better chess player than he is artist.
Swinging
But
artist, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, just because some guy's famous and in museums doesn't mean he was actually fulfilling his
I
telos.
don't really have a position on like Dadaism in
No,
general.
me
I'm
neither.
kind of like
It's cool,
I'm kind
dude.
of I see the gimmick. I kind of respect it. It's like I don't know if it's like great art and like moving in the same way. I also wonder if there's some kind of a synthesis to be had where um, a work of Dadaism could be legitimately beautiful by like it's or if there's some way to like kind of reconcile like anti-art and art. But I'm sorry, I'm getting carried away again.
So we could go in all these directions, but
Yeah,
the
yeah.
main thing I'm picking up from you is this telos shit,
Mhm.
because it's something that I do. Um, dude, I literally hesitate to say believe. We are very different types of cats in a lot of ways because
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm skittish about even saying I believe that, but I'm so attracted to that idea of it's resonant. It's resonant with my
Maybe
experience.
like I guess maybe the synthesis, and they're pretty hesitant to like believe in this, but that like there are forms of expression of like that underlying truth that are not like just outright statements,
Yeah,
that like speech at the end of the day is an action, and it is one of several actions that can either like uphold like the good, the true, and the beautiful, like the three transcendentals, or speech can be contrary to it. But also
yeah.
like other actions can do the same thing. Like can extra life is extra life like a kind of expression of like some underlying like truth, like an absolute truth, like not just like
The,
a way of looking, but like it must assert something. I feel like
I
it,
can't.
even like to express an experience is kind of an assertion,
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I'm not such a maniac that I would make the claim that literally my entire body of work, is this like sovereign or whatever. But I mean, the experience of writing, particularly melodies, and this
Hmm.
is sort of aside from arrangements and like instrumental stuff and production and lyrics and blah blah blah, but like literally just tunes, fucking concatenations of pitch and rhythm and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
writing those that stuff to me is just clearly truth. I mean, these tunes are in accordance with my nature and just with nature, period. And it's morally good.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Hmm.
that's as close as I come to sort of moral
I
prescription.
I have a pretty hard time engaging with like the beauty question, because that's another thing we haven't talked about yet, at least directly, is aesthetic nihilism. And
Yeah.
I might actually be some kind of aesthetic nihilist. I mean,
What
I probably not, but like
just that there's no
I feel
such
like
thing as beauty or
when we
not.
talk about like the three transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful, the true, I'm like absolutely like that is real. That is like something that that I believe should be pursued. And the good, I believe, is like follows very succinctly from the true. There can't be something that's good that's also false.
Wow.
Um, with the beautiful, I was kind of that's harder for me. I mean,
I'm
I
flipping
definitely.
out, dude. I'm the same. I'm the same way. We have the same feeling on the good, but I think it comes from the beautiful, not from the true. But I like, the
Huh.
true. No, I like true,
Well,
dude.
because like I might like. I'm pretty on the fence about like aesthetic relativism versus realism. You know.
Yeah, but think about this though, man. Think about this. We were talking about like it's wrong to lie. We both are like, yeah, it's wrong to lie no matter what. We got into it. Then there's Jews in the attic, and there's even your girl being like, "Do I look fat in this dress?" Like we
Uh-huh.
already are ready to. We're already literally ready to lie just to like not have a fucking fight at dinner. And as far as beauty, I can't think of any excuse to write a shitty melody. Like I can't think of
Mm.
one scenario where that would be necessary. I mean, I guess maybe there's a Jews in the attic for that.
I mean, you could maybe like the musical equivalent of Duchamp. I mean, John Cage, maybe. I don't know, like the what like rolling. What do you call it? Indeterminacy.
It's yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, like that. I mean, I would probably consider that a shitty melody of sorts. You know, if that isn't a shitty melody, then I would wonder what is.
Is that
Would it be
beauty?
one that doesn't like aspire, what one that aspires to like beauty but misses the mark so much? Like,
Yeah. Some
what
of
would you?
Kate.
I mean, this is where I feel like you can like opine a little bit more. Is like about the ethics of the melody, you know, of the music itself, like.
Yeah, I thing is I can only speak to my own experience, man, which has to do with like, yeah, like acting in accord with my nature, which when I'm doing it, it is just clearly beyond reason. Just I love the expression "you can't tell me shit." Like I just love that expression. It's just like when this is happening, you just can't tell me nothing, man.
I would probably have trouble with that because I feel like it kind of it steamrolls over the process, you know?
I mean,
And like
or it
that.
flies above it on wings of retardation, man. Which is, I mean, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been doing it for half a life, and I'm gonna keep doing it for the second half. But,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
It's
like,
like I like, is a shitty melody to you more a matter like because I brought up John Cage and I'm not like anti John Cage or anything, but it's like if that's not like I mean the process is high effort, but like it's almost designed to like create like the least like human intervention possible.
yes, yeah,
But like
yeah.
that mm, is if that's not a shitty melody, is it really just a matter of like I know it when I see it?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it's that censorship pornography debate or whatever the fuck I did.
Can you think of a song that you would say has a shitty melody that's like popular that I would know?
Off the top of my head, no, because they're usually like actually pretty good. Like, ah,
Pop
that's all.
music has like one purpose to sound good, you know? It
Yeah,
has like, it almost, in some ways, it's like pure because it doesn't have like other like subcultural influences or like, it's not about, shit, I'm like really, am I coming up as really orange intermittent?
yeah,
If I
yeah,
like,
yeah. You're having these multiple orange man good or orange man
let's
bad,
see.
sort of in and
Okay,
out.
I don't know. Is that better?
Yeah, well,
I
yeah,
think that's
no,
better. I like that.
a little lo-fi. But what's interesting talking about melody, and here's where I'm going to pander to your
Uh-huh.
bashed out audience again. Whatever. This is our audience. Be
I
sure.
don't even know what my audience is.
I
Like,
know.
I have no idea.
I'm just fucking with you because you're my most conservative friend. No, but on the edgy Times Square topic, did you happen to read this Bronze Age pervert? He wrote some article about classical music in some one of these like dissident it's so cringe, but these like dissident mags or whatever. He had something about classical music, and it was, I mean, basically he was just, it was like some very like decline of the West, classical music's dead, and sort of trying to imagine what the possibility of a new classical music was. But I was just struck with, amidst all the like this like, we're in ruins reactionary vibe, he was like, the one thing that he was like, everything's crumbled, but he was like, melody still remains. Like he had this position that like melody itself in a pure sense has like not degenerated at all.
Yeah.
And I liked that. It
Well,
was
it's way less
probably the
complex
main
than it
point.
normally would be, right? Like, if you compare like Western art music or whatever in terms of its melodic complexity to like broadly speaking to popular music. Like popular music is very privated of a lot of like the dynamism that would come with, like I'm also like a total Philistine about music, which is why I feel guilty. Like I feel like I feel very simple because I don't like, because I enjoy, you know, I don't know, like the Velvet Underground more than like Bach. Because I know
Yeah,
that Bach has like the more like melodic complexity.
yeah,
Like there's more like the music itself in the pure form is kind of like more expressive. But
I know, like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I know. It's like I almost don't want to go too deep on this because I also probably appreciate like punk shit more than Bach, but I can experience what's deep about Bach more than someone who hasn't checked it. In any
like
case,
I feel like I should be more impressed by Bach. And not for like racial, like European civilization greatness reasons, but literally just because of like the like like because of the pure musical qualities,
yeah,
because of the
yeah, yeah.
compositional complexity and like, you know, stuff
Right.
like that.
I can appreciate all that, and I still actually am kind of more into like Wu Tang Forever and stuff. But it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but the whatever. I just as a melodist, as someone who's so obsessed with melody, I liked that he was talking about all this degeneration, but then he kind of had to admit he's like, well, actually, like bubblegum pop shit on the radio, the melodies themselves are not actually worse than like a theme from Mozart. It's just that in Mozart, the theme is developed and there's another theme and there's sonata form and there's this overarching.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Like what is done with the melodies is like this huge fucking European achievement and all this and that. But that like even in the ruins of that, the melodies themselves have not gotten worse. So that made me feel like, oh, okay, like I don't know, like even if I agree with his like Hell in a Handbasket, which I don't necessarily, but even if we're going to accept this Hell in a Handbasket, Death of the West type
I mean, it
shit,
doesn't have to be like Bronze Age pervert. It could be Theodore Adorno, you know?
yes, yes. Another guy who's like, was he leftist? Like, just like yet another.
I think that, yeah, no, I kind of like reading like Adorno now. I'm like, oh my God, he would be like, you know, he would say, he might still, you know, he might, if you could take him to the year 2023, he might still tell you he's a communist, but he would not be fellow travelers with the people that call themselves communist, you know?
You know who wrote his dissertation on Adorno?
No.
Richard Spencer.
Oh, well,
I mean,
no, actually, I feel like
I hope it's not good. I mean, that would really bum me out if it's like awesome and you're just like, fuck, I gotta.
well, I don't know if you how closely you follow Spencer, but he's more or less like he's like a liberal now, like
Right?
full
He's just
stop.
like a normal liberal who's just like, yeah, I'm racist, but
No,
whatever.
and I think that there's like a lot of the dynamic that gets him to that point is really interesting. I always call them the vote blue no matter who Wignats. I think my friend, I think it's Nightmare Vision coined the term alt MSNBC. Um, but it's like I get where how they can come to that, because it's like not only do you get to play the radical and be like, I'm so far right wing, I'm so Nazi that I've, you know, come to like this complete like 180, you know, I've completed the
Right.
circle and come to the opposite conclusion. But
Mhm.
then you also like find yourself with like views that are more acceptable at a dinner party or whatever in high society.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
there's also like, I don't know, is like is America under Biden is like that might be like the worst. That might be worse for black people than like than like fucking America under anyone else. Who knows? I can't do the
Mhm.
math on that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
I shouldn't have even brought up Wignats, but Adorno was neither a Wignat nor a lib, and he's on some of the same shit that BAP is on. Um,
Yeah.
in any case, but yeah, I mean, melody,
Well,
ethics,
I think that you could say that Adorno is not a nihilist.
very.
That maybe I mean I would wonder about like his moral foundations, but clearly he's a downstream philosopher. You know, I'm very much like an upstream thinker where it's like we have to get to the core of everything, whereas he's like someone much kind of like Nietzsche that can like, you know, provide wisdom about many things that are like far like, you know, further down like the epistemic chain of reasoning. And so, you know, but like with the vision that comes through from Adorno is very you know, absolutist and realist, and you know, valorizes something, maybe the human spirit, maybe
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think these guys are humanists, right? I mean, as far as I
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
I mean, but I don't. Yeah, man. I still don't. Dude, I still. It's not that I'm even pushing back, man. I'm just trying to push deeper. I don't totally. Yeah, I still don't get like this epistemic, like this reasoning of like getting to moral things, man. I love it. I love what you're saying. I just don't. I don't hear it like just examples, man. You know what I mean? Like I'm just kind of like I mean, are you more just kind of staking out that this is like a
Well, like, do
project?
you think like what I said about like the death penalty earlier is like an example that like part of the reason for like my hesitance about it is because it's like it privates someone of their like the years of their life, and that is like
Yeah.
a very direct correlation with like the original principle.
Yeah, yeah. So life
Um,
it's okay. Yeah. So just life itself, being itself.
that is a very core
Yeah.
law. I think that's not like the only one. I think, like I said, like there's ways where you can still exist, but like not be like fully realized. And that's kind of where teleology proper comes in, where it's like, if you're, to be also means like to live a life of virtue.
Right, right, right.
And that virtue is determined by that which like brings you to the fullness of your nature. And yeah, I mean, I really do, to give like specific example, like that's why I brought up like the sodomy usury thing. Even it's
Yeah.
not to be because it's hot, but like because it's like it's an effective demonstration of like the kind of concept that
Right.
um
But I mean, even okay.
like all of our instruments, all of our faculties are um they have a purpose. There is a thing with it without which those faculties would not exist.
Um, right. I mean, I'm not sure that that's necessarily true, man. I mean,
Well,
that
like
is
our tonsils don't have a purpose, but like you don't moral with your tonsils. And maybe
right.
your tonsils do have a purpose, but
Right, right. But I mean, there's could be all kinds of things that are vestigial. You know what I mean? It's like, and I
hmm,
mean, look, I'm not
yeah.
into. I mean, I'm not into all kinds of transhumanist. Like, I really don't actually like a lot of this.
No,
Like,
I get that. I understand.
I mean, there's plenty of people that are just like, well, it's okay to be gay now because we just don't need to make as much life, and we can grow babies in fucking test tubes. So why don't we? I mean, you know what I mean? Just shit like that, where it's
Mhm.
like,
Well, also, in the Catholic like standard, not to get too into the weeds about it, but like also like not only is non-procreative sex considered a sin, but also like non-sexual procreation. It's like to separate like
right,
the instrument from its ends in either way is considered a privation. But I mean, I get that. I get as far as like I'm not really interested in the specifics as much. I mean, I am, but like I just think that like these are more or less like you can picture a reasonable person coming to a crossroads and like taking one road or the other as it pertains to a lot of these like specific questions.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and that I'm more interested in like the big picture and like the method and like the underlying structure that governs that than I am in particulars of like it's not really like I wouldn't really like draw a line in the sand or think that I'm not on the same page as someone that thinks it's okay to be gay or whatever. You know what I mean?
No,
It's like
I know. No, no.
it's like I
I mean,
must like terminally disagree with it, but it's kind of not really like my focus as like as someone that's thinking about these things on like a meta level,
yeah, you're not like mad about it and shit. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
talking about Foucault before. I don't agree with this at all. Like, I don't like think that this is true, but I just kind of love that he like inverted this shit this way. That like his thing of like yeah, his thing. He's like talking about sex, and it's like I can't remember how he phrased it, but it's like traditionally like sex is supposed to like sexual like pleasure is supposed to be this thing, this like vehicle for creating life, and he's
Mhm.
just like, no, actually the creation of life is a vehicle for more pleasure. Like pleasure is like
Yeah, no, I mean he's interesting. I mean, I actually think my friend Dave he's a YouTuber. I guess I have to say also now that I am a YouTuber.
oh yeah, YouTube
But
is sick, dude. Welcome to the
yeah, this is
cult.
great. I'm loving this.
I
I feel like this is off to a riotous start. This is exactly how I wanted to launch this project. But he has like this point where he says like a lot of like what appear to be a lot of times people are really embarrassed to state like their moral assumptions. They feel like they're gauche for one reason or another. And he says, as an example of this, like progressives, like they jump through all these hoops a lot of the time when really like there's a very simple dynamic at play, which is that there's an underlying axiom that like pure expressiveness and like potentiality and like liberation for its own sake is an inherent moral good, and that you can like dress this up in like different forms of like moral pluralism, but like that actually is like the kind of assumption. I'm not really describing his argument effectively. I honestly don't know that I can, but it's like that that is an interesting like moral axiom, and one that I, you know what I mean, like I feel like actually stated as such, like that's, you know. Sorry, what were you saying before that got me to this?
I just mentioned how Foucault inverted that, where he was just
yeah. So I feel like that's kind of his axiom of sorts. I mean, he's pretty hostile, as I understand, to like all like systems and like, you know, all meta, right? Like the system is kind of like the meta. And I, you know, I do place a high priority on the meta, and I try to be like pluralistic and like have like different degrees of like engaging with things, and, you know.
Yeah. I mean, look, that Foucault shit, like, the idea that life is there, that the purpose of creating life is to create more pleasure that person can have. Like you create a person so they can have orgasms and shit or something like that. I do not like that, because
I think that he wouldn't say that so much as like that is an equally valid purpose as the contrary, you know?
Yeah. Well,
I think he would be pretty hostile to like assigning like absolute purpose in any sense.
Well, you know what word I like that I don't hear people say a lot is, see, you said like liberation. You're talking about how like progressives, progressive thing is always about like liberation. Yeah, like what your friend was saying, that like it is valid to sort of, at least to frankly state what you're, like if a progressive person is frankly stating what you said, that your moral presupposition is that the purpose, like the good is to liberate. Thing is, liberate, that's some really vague shit that can just be beautiful, or it can just be fucking anarchy and destruction. And I'm like, I like the word flourishing, man.
Me too.
I right, because to me that liberation may be necessary for that. Repression may be necessary for that. It depends. You know what I'm saying?
So don't you think it's interesting? Like I would think that liberation has a distinctly left-wing flavor to it.
Yeah,
freedom does not. Like freedom, you know, that could be like, you know, MAGA hat, like trucking, like, you know, that like motorcycle gang freedom, or it can mean like the freedom to marry who you want to marry. But liberation does not have like the same like ideological.
Well, because liberation, it doesn't imply a state. It implies it's about tearing down a structure.
It's about the process. Yeah,
it's about process. It's about destroying a structure, which I am often down with. If the structure's bad, then yeah, like burn this.
Well, me too. I mean, you know, I have like a revolutionary soul, I think.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, you know, yeah, but yeah, I mean, freedom, but it's like flourishing. I mean, that could mean, see, like that word has been used in lefty context. I can't think of anything.
I'm not aware of that. That strikes me as a word with, at the very least, like a kind of like right-wing tendency, because it kind of, for me, it has like connotations of virtue ethics and like Aristotle and like, you know, the flourishing. And I think it kind of, it has a sense of teleology too, right? You flourish.
Yeah, like, but that could be lefty, just you have like a sort of a humanism. I mean, when I think of the left, I just think of humanism. I mean, that's it. Really, basically, this is fucking humanism, you know, and equality too. But like, I love humanism. Equality, I'm like, eh. But
humanism to me, like, I feel like at certain times in history, it's been characterized as left-wing because it was like an entropic force on like the existing structures of meaning and like hierarchy in society. But like humanism now, I would also think has like a reactionary flavor, because I mean, you look at someone like, you look at like like the forces of reaction in places like France or the Netherlands that have like the longest established traditions of like radical thought, and both of them like would characterize themselves as humanists and have like very tenuous relationships with like Christianity as like a cultural force, maybe. But like Marine Le Pen brags about like, you know, this is our tradition of French secularism, like very humanist language and like feminism and like, you know, tolerance and all these things. And in the case of the Netherlands, I think it's even more extreme because you have, you know, the Dutch like far right wing was, you know, kind of inaugurated by Pim Fortuyn, and his pitch was basically like, we are like the society of tolerance and humanism, and Islam is a threat to us because they infringe on our LGBT values.
I know this is yes. I mean, I didn't know the specifics. People that I didn't know that.
There's a really good article about Fortuyn in the New Yorker. It was like from when he was alive. He was basically like this like complete iconoclast that like he was a gay like sociology professor, and he was like bald and he had these dogs and he was fabulous and snarky. You know, they would ask him like, well, are you racist against Arabs? And he's like, how could I be? I love having sex with Arab boys. And like just like kind of like Milo Yiannopoulos, but like in like Y2K era Dutch politics. And he was assassinated ultimately, but like really fascinating figure to me. Like, and like a point of, sorry.
No, it's okay. But well, I know, but I was just talking about flourishing and stuff, and we kind of agreed that that's cool. I mean, I don't know who talks about that in a left context, but that seems humanist to me. I know, oh, right, because I was saying humanism is like a left value or whatever. Let's just say some kind of universal, like flourishing. When you talk about the idea of everyone flourishing, that's a Marx vibe. That is a Marx. That is. I mean, that's, you know, it's like people think that Marx is all about equality. It's like, okay, yes, technically communism, whatever, but like the vibe is not equality as much as freedom, actually, or like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, yes, liberation, emancipation, but it's like maximum human potential. Like that is the vibe. So that's not out of that's not out of step with what you're talking about with the telos and shit. I mean, God is nowhere to be found, of course, in his world. But from what I understand of Marx, I mean, there is a thing of like just humans flourishing, and that just.
Well, do you think it's a Promethean spirit?
I guess, but explain like what, like he's bringing down communism like it's fire, or no?
Well, that like it's about like upholding mankind as the author of its own meaning.
Mankind is the author of its own. Is that
maybe like that is like an extreme form, like humanism? What you characterize as humanism, I might just call like the Promethean spirit, where, you know, I mean, maybe that's not what you mean by humanism. Like when I think of humanism, my inclination is to suppose that humanism is to uphold something about our nature as people, as like a paramount good that grounds all of our values, you know. But maybe it means like we are endowed with like this power to be the author of our own values,
agency, you know? Like our intervention, intervening in things rather than
that. Yeah, which you know, maybe you could equivocate it then with like an existentialist tendency, that like to take like the cold, unfeeling world and, you know, kind of you know, impose meaning upon it by an act of will. I would think that humans are ill-equipped to, by acts of will, to change like these underlying metaphysical realities, you know. But yeah,
well, but you're into human agency on some shit of just like that we have free will and that we can do good or evil, and that
good and evil are like contingent, like they do not proceed from us and from our nature. They precede our nature.
Right, but isn't your thing though that to be good is to fulfill your telos? So the telos is pre-existing, but you
the good is pre-existing, but like you as an agent, like have a you know, you're built a certain way. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Wait, you broke up a little bit in that sentence. Wait, say it
again.
again.
Sorry, I was saying the good precedes you. That, you know, that comes before, but like for you to access it and to participate in it means to uphold your teleology.
Okay. Um, I don't get how that's different. Yeah, what does that mean to participate in it? I mean, you're talking about an
Well,
act,
to advance it to, hmm,
but so the
to
good,
create, I mean, to be a to be an agent for less privated and more fully realized forms of being through your actions, through your decisions.
right?
Um,
You're doing it. I mean,
right,
you're figuring out what it is. I mean, you're figuring out what those actions are, and you're doing those actions. You're figuring out your telos, right? You're figuring
right,
out,
right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, I don't know. The language of flourishing is good for that. I think that because that's what you're
Oh,
talking.
yeah, me too. I
You're
love
talking
it. Like,
maximum
and
potentiality. Like
yeah,
yeah, yeah. So that I
I
mean
also
that's
think, oh, sorry, please.
no, you go ahead. Actually, yeah.
Oh, but yeah, I feel like I'm sorry. I feel like I've dominated a little bit more than I would have liked to. I
No,
mean,
man, you have more to say, dude. You have yeah. No.
okay. I guess the way that I look at Marx, since you brought him up earlier, is that so he applies a deductive method that I would be very comfortable with, that seems to align with my priors, to kind of like downstream like empirical questions where I think that that method doesn't apply. You know what I mean? Like, I think you do deductive reasoning about higher order things that don't apply to, like, and he does deductive reasoning about sociology, which I think is like so far down on like the chain of causality. And I can understand how, like, I would think he would make the argument that like certain empirical realities, like such as class or whatever, will alter your epistemology so much that like you can't really approach things from an objective lens. But I really feel like creating like that standard of like like procedural correctness is really core to creating a stable system. I also think that Marx is someone who, the totality of his thought, kind of, he's a prophet as much as he is a thinker and a philosopher, and so he kind of created a new religious persuasion with the sum of his philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, for him, well, right. For him, the telos of capitalism is communism. So it's actually becoming communism is the telos.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
he's the first accelerationist, whatever.
Uh-huh.
If you look at it that way. Um, yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. The thing about correct. I do love this thing that you have like yeah, this insistence on a proper way, on a proper way, well, to be as rational as possible, I guess,
Uh-huh.
based on as few presuppositions as possible. I mean,
Mhm.
but isn't like just believing in God? I mean, isn't that just like such a huge like presupposition? I mean, doesn't that just kind of make everything?
I mean, I think that believing in the Christian God prima facie is a huge leap that I would actually reject. Oh, I don't know if I could say reject, but um, that I would think is procedurally incorrect. Take that as your axiom, like the Christian God is true.
You don't? Okay, no. That's
Because it relies on so many like contingent, like downstream realities. It relies on history. It relies on other things. Like, we should be trying to make our presuppositions as um, foundational as possible. You know what I mean? But like, to believe in the will, like the creator, like this like force which encompasses everything and kind of like transcends being itself, and is capable of encompassing all that being would entail. That the idea that, whatever your mind is, like, you are created by something like a far greater comprehension than your mind, like that, I do not think is a huge leap. I think that that is very foundational, you
yeah,
know
yeah.
um
It's funny. I mean, I believe in God a lot more than you probably think I do. You know what
No,
I mean?
I kind of got that sense of it pretty early on.
I
But
it's just that it's just to me, it's not like I don't know that I go around living my life with that presupposition being like really felt, you know?
Do you feel like the belief in God like influences your music? Do you feel like that's been a major um beyond just like the abstract level of like, you know, the melody comes from
Yeah.
comes from God, it has like this kind of divine aspect. But like do you feel like you've directly like addressed it like thematically in any of your music? Not just lyrically, but like in terms of like the idea that you try to express. Like has that ever taken an outright religious turn?
Well,
Because
I
I
think,
do sense like a spirituality in your music too.
oh yeah, big time, man. I mean, well, I think you know what's happening as I'm as my life becomes less and less fucked up. Uh, Recent huge breakup aside, uh,
Uh-huh. Well, maybe that's a step on the process too, you know?
yeah, I mean, but even still, I mean, even despite this, it's just you know, as my life gets less and less dramatic, less turbulent, less fucked up, I become more sane, etc. I have less narrative. You know, there's less for me to like talk about in music, for my music to deal with on some like high voltage. Um, you know, I mean, there's positive stuff too, but you know how like suffering and also love and all these intense emotions are like that's high voltage, right? But as I
Mhm.
run out of that shit, I just turn upward to
Yeah.
God. I mean, because I just think about like, well, you know, what is like what's most music in history been? It's been serving some religious purpose. And then I think about most of the shit I'm into from the Middle Ages and like all, you know what I mean? Like all this shit, it's like, where's the voltage coming from, man? Where's the
Well, you
vitality?
know, it's
It's
interesting
not
that
apparent then, you know?
a lot of like popular musicians, you know, there's a stigma like if you're a rock star, you're a cool rock star in your 20s and maybe 30s. Maybe if you're lucky, you can stretch it into the early 40s, but like very few rock stars maintain their cachet and like are considered to have like high quality output like well into their 40s and 50s.
Yeah, yeah.
But like you know, classical musicians, like if you told me that that Palestrina made his best composition right before he died, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised at all. If you told
Oh,
me
yeah.
that like Bach, like he reached his apotheosis when he was like 70, I don't even know how long he
Oh,
lived,
dude,
but like, you know,
fucking
there's no similar stigma to like old composers that there is to like old rock stars.
well,
And
yeah,
I mean, I guess the thing
late
is, you know,
work.
what's that?
It's like late work, you know? Yeah, you don't talk about
Yeah,
late
yeah, a little
work.
Wikipedia page. Yeah, that's like the opposite gender to early life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bowie or Leonard Cohen, you would talk about late work, you know, late.
Right, but all well, you would talk about their late work, and I actually like a lot of that stuff because it gets like bizarre. But
Oh,
like, no one's talk like. Does anyone people like Black Star? Does what's the album that came before Black Star?
I don't know actually.
A
I didn't think
new something.
think
Bowie penultimate. It's like it has like the cover art of Heroes, but it has like a big white box over it.
oh man, I don't even yeah, actually, yeah. I don't even remember.
The next day.
Okay,
That's the
yeah,
name of the album. It was
that
released in 2013. It was Bowie's penultimate album, and it was well received. But no one's talking about that in the same breath as like you know Ziggy Stardust or Low or anything like that. You know what I mean?
I
Um,
guess. I mean, there's but I mean, the reason I brought that oh wait, no, did you have were
It's just like and like you know, I love Earthling, like the drum and bass album, but like that's
yeah,
really
it's cool actually. Yeah, it kind
it's
of is.
really cool, and I love like when it's not like they're creating masterpieces. Maybe they can just create something interesting for a
Yeah,
change, you
yeah,
know.
for sure.
Leonard Cohen too, you know, everyone loved his last album, and all of his stuff was pretty acclaimed up until he died. But you know, like no one's really talking about like his later work except for his last album in the same breath as like
Yeah,
his early stuff. And
no.
so even when there's exceptions, the pattern still holds. I think the only time I can think of exceptions for like rock stars, maybe. I was gonna say Dinosaur Jr., but no, actually, like it's still the same thing. Like they all of their stuff is good, but it's not the same. But I do feel like maybe like really technical like musicians with like an eye towards the classical or towards the spiritual, like Godspeed You Black Emperor. I think that maybe in due time, like later Godspeed albums will be as
Yeah,
acclaimed as
I'm
Lift
not sure.
Your
Yeah. but
fists like
but I
antennas.
mean the main, I mean the thing, I'm sorry, just I mean yeah, like rock, I mean genre shit aside, I mean just on a personal level, it's like if I like it, just the less narrative I have, the
Mhm.
less my music is based on any kind of you know, you asked like do I deal with God and the religious in my music, but my point was really just that like the more I run out of narrative, or I guess there's always narrative, but the less I am motivated to plumb my own experience for inspiration. I just realize like all I need is God and sound. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
it's like if you just like, I mean, I go on these wormholes of just watching like gospel music and stuff, which I don't even know
Yeah.
much.
Well,
I
I
don't
think it's
know.
that's the breadth though. That's like how we started it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you have like a wide breadth of influence, and maybe that's
yeah.
what allows you to keep your edge through,
I mean, this
through
is,
the years.
but I mean, you know, this is like I just look at this music. I mean, I like Renaissance music, gospel music. I'm like, what's really animating this? It's literally just God or life, an affirmation of life. You know, people, musical people who are fulfilling their telos of doing this thing. You know, and it's like, but so then I start realizing, like, wait a minute, even when I was like singing about like getting pussy and doing blow or whatever it is, or like even when Wu Tang is like rapping about like whatever, like, you know, crack deals and whatnot, it still is all just about God. And this
Yeah.
all this other shit is an excuse. Like, you know,
Well, are
it's
you
just
into like the decadent writers at all? Are you into like Oscar Wilde or J.K. Huisman or?
I both. Well, like Huisman, I recently read Against Nature. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so good. It's like a
it,
novel about interior decorating, but
yeah,
it's also like deeply spiritual, you know?
it's the most like perfumed out vibe and shit. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
the and yeah, dude, I love Oscar Wilde, man. It's
But
like
like both, I feel like that's like the purest embodiment of what you're talking about, where it's like the pursuit of beauty for its own end, like, and even like a sociopathic beauty, which I think is kind of what the decadents espouse. It, somehow, pretty much all of the decadent writers that didn't like die young ended up becoming like fervent religionists in one
yeah,
form or another, and more
that's
often than not, Catholic religionists. Like,
I think that's where I'm headed. I think that's where I'm headed. I think it's probably going to be Jewish though, and it'll be then we'll have other debates. And
yeah, no, I mean, yeah, when you're a rabbi, I would love to have you back on the stream, but
I'll
I've
be
definitely
spitting
wanted
some.
to talk to a rabbi, but
I'm looking right at I'm looking at Maimonides over here,
okay.
uncreased, untouched book, right next to Simone Weil, which is creased and red over here.
What do you think is the particular appeal of Judaism to you, other than like ancestral
Um,
affinity?
like the vibe of questioning
Yeah.
as a spiritual practice. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know. Do you know this band? Show Me the Body. Are you familiar with this band?
I've heard of them, but I'm not a listener. No.
They're kind of like a like a New York hardcore band. I like am fucking obsessed with this band. And their singer is Jewish, and he gets into a lot of and there's just this line that he screams, it's like, my people taught me to wrestle with God. And it's
Yeah.
like it's just that, like, you know, this sense of I had did like a 3-hour podcast with Jeremiah Zimmerman about
Yeah, yeah, that's the
the,
like what is it? Cautious Zionism podcast, was it?
what's that?
No, there was like I remember you talked to someone. He was like a Zionist, but with like a qualifier, or was that another Jewish individual?
I think you're thinking of somebody else. I didn't have I didn't have a Zionist cat. Jeremiah's pretty
He
young.
was no, he was saying like he was like oh, it was just like a problem, like or like conflicted Zionism or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe he kind of did. He's a big Finkelstein fan.
Oh, cool, cool.
I'm bummed that he had to leave before you came at my birthday hang
Ah, damn.
because
Well, there will be other times,
he
but
gave me the Finkelstein book, and I told him that
dude, I would love to have you guys at the beach someday. I would just like
yeah,
bring you to Brighton Beach and have you meet Norman,
oh,
because he's a regular. He's there every day.
I, I would
He's
love
very
that.
friendly.
I would love that, and Jeremiah would fucking flip. We should totally do that. But
Yeah, totally.
but,
But
but we were talking about this movie, The Believer, that just deals with Judaism, and it's like I don't know. It's like this vibe of like this vibe. There's this thing about Jewish like mysticism where it's like questioning shit and critiquing stuff and this kind of challenging God and challenging the rules,
Mhm.
like the ultimate tribute to it or something, like this kind of
Yeah.
like, and it's almost like tearing away at things to get to this like rarefied, like Ein Soft, the sort of like the highest, like most rarefied substance. So I think like the overthinking, the talking, the thinking, the questioning, the looking for exceptions to rules, blah blah blah. That as a spiritual practice is appealing to me with Judaism. The commentary.
Me too. Honestly, like I'm pretty philo-Semitic because I really do admire like that questioning of everything. Like that kind of to me, it touches upon like the procedure that I've talked about, that like because a big method that I believe in is just like, asking someone of their presupposition why and why and why and like drilling hard to the core, like a kind of like Socratic method. And I think might be where it differs from the Jewish tradition is that like in the Socratic method, you're kind of like trying to get at like uh like a very core belief. You're trying to get at the form, you're trying to get at like the absolute. Whereas like the way that I view it, and maybe like where I have like tension with like the Jewish way of looking at the world, like on a purely philosophical level, is just that I feel like Judaism is like, or like Jewish thought is pretty disinterested in like higher order truths and is much more practical and is much more interested in like contingency and like in you know like downstream expressions, and like isn't interested in the absolute so much as in the reality of like day-to-day life.
I
Would you
get.
say that's a fair characterization?
I'm not sure. I don't. I know what you're saying. I'm not. I don't know enough to.
Because I think like, how many like great Jewish philosophers are there? There's so many great Jewish intellectuals, obviously. Like, but like in terms of philosophers, there's Maimonides, who is like a thorough philosopher, but is also very interested in things that are downstream. And then there's Spinoza, who is actually much more of my mentality, who is, very interested in like the absolute, but he was kicked out of Judaism for doing philosophy the way that he did. So
I didn't even know he was. I didn't even know he was Jewish. That's
he was, he was very Jewish, and he was expelled from his synagogue for his beliefs about nature of God and just like his method. He's a really interesting figure too. I mean, he was like a very detailed like a lens maker, and
that's right.
I think
right.
he sued his sister for his father's inheritance because there was like some dispute that emerged after his father died, and he won the lawsuit and he gave all of his inheritance to his sister anyway. He was interested in like it was like about like the procedure and like the
That's
pursuit of justice or whatever.
that's cool as hell, man. That's very.
Yeah,
I totally.
I think some might call it annoying, but I when I hear that, I'm just like I love
Yeah, that's not annoying at all. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah. No, because it's like I don't know what dialectic he was trying to get at by going through with the lawsuit or whatever, the court drama with his sister, but like, and I think that's why he, especially among secular humanists, he's like upheld as like this paragon of virtue, even though his philosophical system is very, it kind of undermines the foundation for a stable sense of virtue in itself,
Really? Okay. Yeah, I haven't
Well,
really.
that's why I would think that he's like a hard moral nihilist too, similar to Nietzsche. But I do love some pardon. I do admire him because he, like me, is like a very like hardline, like deductive rationalist. And he believes in like procedural correctness in a very similar manner that I do. I feel like a lot of times when people bring up Spinoza now, they're interested in like Deleuze. Like I think that the kind of like when you see Spinoza invoked now, it's in a very Deleuzian sense where this is like a picture of the world. But I actually think that he's pretty hostile to that method, that he would be much more of the persuasion of like we should be trying to find the correct procedure.
Okay.
So,
I haven't read a word of Spinoza, but I tried to read Deleuze's book, The Fold, and yeah, I don't even remember what I took away from it, other than just the fold itself is a cool image as a pocket of, I don't know, like
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
but yeah, man. Well, yeah, I think it may be time for me to wind down.
No, I was just about to ask that
Quarter,
too.
quarter one, but not even like I'm tired really, but I just like should kind of like.
Yeah, no, it's like, yeah, it makes
But I
sense.
mean, we got into all kinds of great stuff. I feel like we didn't totally like identify where nihilism, and maybe this is good that we didn't, because
No, it's a springboard. It's like,
it didn't
you
turn
know,
into it didn't turn into like a gossip session. But I am kind of, yeah, like I didn't go off as much as I didn't get as fired up, but I guess it's because we agree so implicitly on this. I mean, I fucking hate nihilism, man. I mean, I really am
in
not.
what sense? Like
Like,
morally,
I mean,
or
just
just as like an attitude of like life is nothing, it's meaningless.
that attitude. I mean, in
Yeah,
the pedestrian way that it's you. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like
right.
when people accuse other people of being nihilistic, like to me, that's a slur. Like, if someone was just like, "Oh, you're just being nihilistic," I would
Mhm,
like take umbrage at that. Um,
mhm.
which there's almost nothing else that I would feel that way about.
Hmm.
You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
I might feel the same way about someone saying like you're a sophist or
Okay.
you're, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if because like there was a group of people that called themselves sophists. And now it's a slur. I don't think there's anyone that would say I uphold the school of sophistry. But um, but like there are people that would identify as nihilists in different forms, and I think that they have a critique that needs to be engaged with and maybe even synthesized with, that like where they are the razor. Nihilism is the razor. It, gets to the core, and it's like, what do you believe in? Why do you believe in it? And if you don't answer it to my satisfaction, then I won't accept a belief in anything. And maybe that's why I have like an affinity for, and in an earlier, like at the beginning of my intellectual journey, like, I mean, I was a teenager, but I would have said I was a moral nihilist before I was a Catholic. Like I would, and I think that the expectation is that I would have some sense of embarrassment about that. And of course I do to a degree, but it's also like, it wasn't just like an edgy thing. It was just like, I have not heard an argument that is sufficiently compelling for me to believe in objective morality. And I think that when I really engage with like the Platonic and like the Catholic intellectual tradition, that is kind of what occasioned like my worldview transformation. And so, I don't really want to like just like stand here and like throw darts at nihilism and like,
Okay. Okay.
you know what I mean? It's like kind of something that I feel like I get it, and I almost feel like it's so destructive to beauty and meaning and like more good conduct and whatever. Like
Yes.
people are right to have like this disdain for it. And I would even say like when you've endorsed that position, you have no right to complain of any power. Like if the position was like we should kill all nihilists, they would have no argument against that. I might, but
Right.
they have no right to complain. I
They
would
would.
be the one to complain on their behalf. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
also like in the pure form, it is an idea, and it's an idea that I think is wrong, but like wrong for interesting reasons and like worth engaging with.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I mean, it seems like you're talking about it like if nihilism's the razor. I mean, isn't that just critique is the razor? I mean, just like
Perhaps,
interrogating presuppositions. I mean,
perhaps, I mean,
if like, I mean, interrogating shit is just critique, right? I mean,
I feel like maybe nihilism is kind of like the terminal end of critique, right? It's
right.
like if you drill into axioms enough and you never accept a if you never accept arbitrariness, the problem is like nihilism and skepticism more generally, like they do kind of rely on presuppositions. They have assumptions all their own. You know what I mean? Um, and I think that's where it kind of becomes open to critique of its own, and you can start to build positivity from the critique of nihilism. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
But I also feel like it's maybe, yeah, it's critique. It's if you critique everything and you don't assert anything, then you become a nihilist. You know what I mean?
Um,
Nihilism is pure criticism, and it does make implicit assertions, but that's the thing. Making assertions is inevitable. If you express an idea, you're making an assumption.
yeah, I guess so. I gotta think about that. I can't. Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Sorry, it's late. I know.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, no.
Thanks for staying overtime.
No, no, it's cool. I didn't have like a hard cut. I was just kind of like,
Yeah, yeah.
I thought I would be tired actually. It's like I got up at like 7:30 and just been like,
I feel energized. Like when I get into
yeah,
when I get into this, like when I get on my high horse, I'm like I could ride that all
that's
night.
yeah, no, yeah. Like, I was like winding down, and then I like brought up nihilism again. But anyway, no, no, no. Let's wrap. Let's wrap. But dude, as always, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I knew this would be a great start to this new podcast that I'm launching because, like, I know especially recently now that you're back in New York, like I feel like we can talk for hours and just like keep going and about everything, And
Yeah,
I really cherish that. That's
yeah, me too, man.
I'm glad the reception has been good. Thanks to Horatius and V Williams for contributing to the chat. It's a humble start, but I feel like this is really exactly how I wanted to launch this thing. So
Yeah, man.
thanks so much for participating.
But
If
so
you have any final thoughts,
yeah. So this is going to be a YouTube channel like that. You're just going to keep doing this on this and release it as a podcast, like and an audio.
yeah, I'm planning to release it as a podcast. I don't know as far as like getting it to like do you do you don't do your podcast as a like on the podcasting apps, do you? It's
I do.
just on YouTube.
I have it on Libsyn. I do it distributed on Libsyn.
Oh shit. Okay, then you'll have to instruct me on how to do that because also I couldn't have handled the technical aspects without your advice. So
yeah, no, my shit is on. It's just on Spotify though. I don't have it on all the other things. I don't think it's on Apple Podcasts. I don't know.
Well, it's not the priority for me. Like, like I said, there's a lot of people I want to interview that don't fit the aesthetic of the toilet. And you're in the crossover, you're like a bridge. Maybe I'll have like other guests from the beautiful toilet on too, but like I have like a different vision for this. It's like less about the art and less about like talking to artists that I admire and more about, talking to just like having detailed interviews. I want to talk to politicians and prisoners and
hell yeah, dude, bring some incarcerated people and and get Finkelstein, man.
Yeah, no, I've thought about having him on the beautiful toilet too. I really just I really just have to give his book more attention to give him a thorough interview up to his standards.
I was fucking watching him talk about do you know Amy Wax? Do you know this she's like saying like a lot, whatever. She's a professor of something at Yale, saying like a lot of like really pretty openly racist stuff. And like,
it's not Amy Chua, is it?
No. She's like this old Jewish lady. Whatever. It doesn't. It's just
okay.
Just Finkelstein's vibe on her was just really funny. He was like going
cool.
He was just defending. He was just talking about how he hates people trying to cancel her, but that he wants to spit in her face and stuff. Like he was just
yeah. No, he always has like he always comes to like bizarre conclusions about things. Like
he was just like, I would not censor her. I would not cancel her. I would.
That's kind of like Elon's like justification for banning Kanye West when he was on his anti-Semitic tirade, and he's just like, well, someone was like, I thought you would only ban like violence. And he's like, yes, his speech was violent because it made me want to punch him in the face. but anyway, yeah. Thanks for helping me to launch this. I'm glad we did it when we did, despite my circumstances. I think it went really well. So
absolutely, man. Yeah.
You want to like plug your shit before we go? I know, stuff about other life or extra life. Sorry, that's the second time I'm doing
Justin Murphy.
Extra life and
yeah, I don't have anything coming right up. I'm just writing the next Extra Life record. I'll probably be, I'm playing like a free improvisation gig this weekend on Saturday at Studio G with just drummer Mike Pride. early at 7. But yeah, in general, I'm just, yeah, I mean, next January, the next Extra Life will come out. And then, yeah, we're going to tour Europe and the States in a whole fucking year from now. So this is, long-term planning, but
Nice.
yeah, man, there it is.
Europe
Yeah,
loves you.
what's that?
Europe loves you.
Europe does. Yeah. I have good shit in Europe. But yeah, I mean, yes, right. If you don't know me, you haven't checked my music out. Yeah, check out Extra Life. Check out the last Extra Life record
In Psalm Zero.
if you folks want to check it out. Yeah, or Psalm Zero. Essentially.
Simple answers.
Yeah, all this stuff, man.
All right, cool. Well,
Cool.
so long.
All right.
I'll end the broadcast like that.